After dropping my only son at the airport for a business trip to Dubai, I was driving away with a smile on my face when my phone buzzed. It was Martha, our housekeeper of 10 years. The message was short, but it froze the blood in my veins. It read simply, "Mr. Cole, do not go home. Pull over and check the living room cameras right now." I thought perhaps there was a fire or a break-in. I pulled my Lincoln Navigator to the shoulder of the highway, my hands trembling slightly as I opened the security app. What I saw on that small screen did not look like a disaster. It looked like a party. My daughter-in-law Skylar was pouring a glass of my vintage 1982 Bordeaux, a bottle I had been saving for my 70th birthday. Standing next to her was a man in a suit I did not recognize, holding a laser tape measure against my walls. But the real shock came a second later. The bathroom door opened, and out walked Damon, my son, the boy I had just hugged goodbye at Terminal 4 not 20 minutes ago. He was not on a plane to Dubai. He was in my living room, laughing as he took the glass of wine from his wife. I turned the volume up on my phone, and his voice came through the speakers, clear and sharp enough to slice through my heart. He said, "The old man is finally gone. We have exactly 2 weeks to turn this museum into cash before he figures out he has been evicted. I am Coleman Jeffries, 68 years old, and I spent 40 years designing the skyline of Chicago as a lead architect. I built foundations that could withstand earthquakes, yet I never saw the cracks in my own foundation until the roof came crashing down on my head. I thought I was raising a son, but it turns out I was harboring a parasite. Before I tell you how I lost everything in a single afternoon and how I fought to get it back, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that loyalty is expensive, and you should not expect it from cheap people. Let's go back to an hour before that phone call. The morning air at JFK Airport was crisp. I stood by the curb, watching the porters unload Damon's Louis Vuitton luggage from the trunk. I felt a swell of pride in my chest. Damon looked sharp in his suit, playing the part of the successful international businessman perfectly. He told me this deal in Dubai was going to be the one that finally put his consulting firm on the map. He said he wanted to make me proud. I remember reaching into my jacket pocket and handing him an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000. I told him this was for capital, just in case things got tight over there. I told him to be safe. Damon took the envelope, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Was it guilt? Was it hesitation? At the time, I thought it was just nerves. He hugged me, but the embrace felt loose, like he was afraid to get too close. He pulled away quickly, checked his watch, and said, "Thanks, Dad. I will call you when I land." I watched him walk through the automatic doors, disappearing into the crowd. I got back into my car, feeling like a king. My wife, Lucille, rest her soul, would have been so proud of the man he had become. I turned up the jazz music on the radio and merged onto the expressway, thinking about how quiet the house would be for the next 2 weeks. I was planning to finally organize my study and perhaps go fishing. I was humming along to a Miles Davis track when the vibration of the phone against the leather console interrupted my peace. Martha never texted. She was old school. If she needed something, she called, and usually it was about grocery lists or scheduling the cleaners. To see a text from her that said, "Do not go home," was alarming enough. But the second part, telling me to check the cameras, made my stomach drop. Martha knew I respected privacy. I rarely checked the internal cameras unless the alarm was triggered, but something in the urgency of her text made me obey. I swerved across 3 lanes of traffic to reach the emergency shoulder, ignoring the honking horns of the cars behind me. I opened the app. The connection took a few seconds to load, and those seconds felt like hours. When the image stabilized, my brain could not process what I was seeing. The living room was bright. The curtains were drawn back. Skylar, my daughter-in-law, was not crying over her husband's departure. She was wearing a silk robe, walking around with a clipboard. And there was the stranger, the man in the cheap gray suit, measuring the dimensions of my fireplace. Then came Damon. Seeing him there, in my house, when he should have been at 30,000 feet, was disorienting. It was like looking at a ghost. He was holding that glass of wine. My wine. The wine Lucille and I bought in France 20 years ago. He took a sip and made a face, as if it was cheap vinegar. The stranger asked him about the timeline. Damon laughed, a sound that was ugly and distorted through the tiny phone speakers. He said, "Don't worry, Gavin. My father thinks he is funding a business expansion. By the time he realizes I never left New York, you will have the sale finalized. The power of attorney he signed last year for my medical care has a loophole. We are going to declare him incompetent. This house is as good as sold." I sat there in my car, the engine idling, staring at the screen. The $50,000 I just gave him, the hug, the Dubai story. It was all a script, a performance, and I was the audience who paid for the ticket. A rage, hot and blinding, started to rise from my gut. It wasn't just about the money. It was the disrespect. It was the mockery. They were drinking my wine and measuring my coffin while I was still breathing. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. My first instinct was violence. I wanted to drive back there, kick down the door, and show them exactly how incompetent I was. I wanted to wipe that smirk off Damon's face. I checked my mirrors and slammed on the gas, swinging the heavy SUV back onto the highway. I was going home, and it was not going to be a peaceful arrival. I was doing 90 miles an hour, weaving through traffic, when the phone rang. It was Martha again. I answered on the speakerphone, shouting that I was on my way, and that I was going to throw them all out on the street. Martha's voice was shaking, but she was firm. She screamed, "Mr. Cole, stop! You cannot come here. Listen to me. There is a police cruiser sitting in the driveway right now. They are not here to arrest Damon. They are waiting for you." I slammed on the brakes, slowing down just enough to not lose control. I asked her what she was talking about. Martha whispered, clearly hiding somewhere in the house, saying that she heard Skylar talking to the officers. "They have a paper, Mr. Cole. It is a pink paper. An emergency medical hold. They told the police you are having a psychotic break, that you are violent and a danger to yourself. If you step foot on this property, they will handcuff you and take you straight to a psychiatric ward. You will disappear for 72 hours, and by the time you get out, they will have changed the locks and the ownership. Do not come home." I felt the blood drain from my face. A 5150 hold. Involuntary psychiatric commitment. It was the perfect trap. If I showed up angry, shouting, and aggressive, I would be proving their point. The police would see a large, angry black man yelling at his well-dressed son and daughter-in-law, and they would follow the paperwork. Damon knew exactly which buttons to push. He knew my temper. He was counting on it. I asked Martha where I should go. She told me to just drive, to go anywhere but there, and then she hung up abruptly. I could hear Skylar's voice in the background, asking who she was talking to. I took the next exit, my heart pounding against my ribs like a hammer. I needed to think. I needed cash. I needed resources. I pulled into a gas station with an ATM outside. I needed to get away from the city, maybe go to a hotel in Jersey until I could call my lawyer. I walked up to the machine, the cold wind hitting my face, reminding me this was real. I inserted my debit card and punched in my PIN. I requested $500. The machine whirred for a moment, making that familiar mechanical counting sound. Then it stopped. A red message flashed on the screen. Transaction denied. Card retained. I stared at it. I pressed cancel. Nothing happened. The machine had swallowed my card. I tried to pull it out, but it was gone. I reached for my wallet and pulled out my Platinum American Express. I ran inside the gas station to buy a bottle of water, just to test it. The clerk ran the card. He looked at me, then at the card, then back at me with a suspicious look. He said, "Sir, it says pick up card. Call issuer." He held on to it. I argued with him, telling him I was Coleman Jeffries, that I had a limit higher than his annual salary. He just shrugged and put the card behind the counter, threatening to call the cops if I caused a scene. I walked back to my car with nothing but a quarter tank of gas and $40 in cash in my pocket. My banking app on my phone showed a gray padlock icon next to every account. Frozen. Suspected fraud. Reported by Guardian. I sat in the driver's seat of my luxury car, realizing I was effectively homeless and destitute. The realization hit me harder than the betrayal. They hadn't just stolen my house. They had erased my identity. They had stripped me of my power, my access, and my credibility. Damon hadn't just planned a theft. He had planned an execution of my life. I looked at my hands. These were the hands that drew blueprints for the city library and the central station. Now, they couldn't even buy a bottle of water. I slammed my fist against the dashboard, a primal scream escaping my throat. But screaming wouldn't solve this. I took a deep breath, forcing the architect in me to take over. When a building is collapsing, you don't scream at the bricks. You find the structural failure and you fix it. Or you bring the whole thing down on top of the people who sabotaged it. I opened the glove compartment and reached for the false bottom I installed years ago. There, wrapped in a cloth, was an old Nokia burner phone and a set of keys to a small studio apartment in the Bronx that I hadn't visited in 20 years. Damon didn't know about the studio. He didn't know about the burner phone. And he certainly didn't know that his father was done being a victim. I started the engine. The old man wasn't gone. The old man was just getting started. The smell of stale coffee and burnt bacon filled the air of the tiny diner in Queens. It was the kind of place where the tabletops were sticky and the neon sign outside flickered with a dying buzz. I had not set foot in a place like this in 30 years, but my lawyer, Harper Steele, insisted on it. She said we needed somewhere invisible, somewhere the police and the private investigators hired by my son would never look for Coleman Jeffries. I sat in the corner booth, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over my eyes, watching the door. When Harper walked in, she looked out of place in her tailored navy suit and stilettos. She carried a thick manila envelope under her arm. She did not say hello. She slid into the booth opposite me and threw the envelope onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud that made the silverware rattle. "Read it," she said. Her voice was cold and devoid of pity. I opened the clasp and pulled out a stack of legal documents. The header at the top made my vision blur. Emergency Ex-Party Guardianship Petition. I scanned the lines and my hands began to shake. It was not just a petition to take over my finances. It was a complete assassination of my character. Attached to the legal filing was a medical report, signed by a Dr. Aris. I had never met a Dr. Aris in my life. The report stated that I had been a patient for 3 years. It detailed incidents that never happened. It claimed I had episodes of violent rage. It said I forgot who my son was. It claimed I had been found wandering the highway at night in my pajamas, screaming at cars. The diagnosis at the bottom was underlined in bold: acute late-stage Alzheimer's with psychotic features. I slammed the paper down on the table. "This is a lie," I hissed, keeping my voice low so the waitress would not hear. "I have never seen this doctor. My mind is sharper than a razor blade. I can recite the structural load calculations of the Sears Tower from memory. Damon knows this. How can he sign this?" Harper pulled the papers back and tapped a signature on the second page. "Look closely, Cole. Damon did not just sign it. He provided a sworn affidavit. He claims you attacked him with a kitchen knife 2 days ago. That is why they got the emergency order. They painted you as an immediate threat to life and safety." I felt a bile rise in my throat. My son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the man I just gave $50,000 to. He had turned me into a monster on paper so he could lock me away. I looked at Harper and told her we need to go to court immediately. I want to sue them for defamation. I want a judge to see me. I want to take a mental competency test right now and prove them wrong. I started to stand up ready to fight, but Harper reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Sit down, Cole," she ordered. "You are not listening. The court system is not a fast food drive-through. If we file a motion to contest this today, we will get a hearing in 6 months. Maybe 4 if we are lucky. Do you know what happens in 4 months? Skylar will have power of attorney over your entire estate by tomorrow morning. By the weekend, she will have liquidated your stock portfolio. By next Tuesday, the house will be sold to a cash buyer, and the money will be moved to an offshore account in the Caymans. When you finally get your day in court and prove you are sane, you will be the king of a pile of ashes. You will have your sanity, but you will be homeless and penniless." I sank back into the cracked vinyl seat. The reality of her words hit me like a physical blow. I asked her what we could do. "If the law cannot help me, then what is the point of paying you?" Harper leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing. She said the law works for people who play by the rules. Your family stopped playing by the rules the moment they forged these medical records. We are not in a courtroom anymore, Cole. We are in the jungle, and in the jungle you do not sue the predator. You hunt him. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small silver key. "Take this," she said, sliding it across the sticky table. "It is for a studio apartment in the Bronx. 4th floor walk-up. No doorman, no cameras, no paper trail. It is owned by a shell company I use for clients who need to disappear. Go there. Stay off the grid. Do not use your credit cards. Do not call your friends." To the world, Coleman Jeffries is a senile old man who wandered off and is currently a missing person. Let them think you are lost and confused. While they are celebrating their victory, we are going to gather evidence that sends them to prison for fraud. I took the key. It felt cold and light in my hand. A key to a cage. A key to hiding. I felt a surge of resistance. I told her, "I am not running away. That house is mine. I designed every beam. I chose every brick." Harper shook her head and said the house is a trap right now. If you go back there, the police will take you to the psychiatric ward and pump you full of sedatives until you actually do lose your mind. Trust me, go to the Bronx. I left the diner feeling like a fugitive. I got back into my car, which I had parked 3 blocks away in an alley. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the silver key. My phone buzzed again. I hesitated to look at it, fearing another message from Martha, telling me the police were closing in. But it was not a text. It was an email notification. It popped up on the screen of my secret burner phone, which was linked to a dormant secondary email address I used for junk mail. I opened the notification. It was from the bank, but not my main account. It was from a joint emergency savings account I had set up with Damon 10 years ago, just in case he ever had a medical crisis. I had forgotten it even existed. The subject line read, "Transaction alert, high-value transfer." I tapped the screen and the numbers made me gasp. $200,000. The entire balance. Transferred 3 minutes ago. The recipient field did not say a hospital or a doctor. It was a wire transfer to a company called Vulture LLC, based in Nevada. I knew that name. I did not know it from business. I knew it from the news. Vulture LLC was a front for a loan shark syndicate that operated out of Las Vegas. They were the kind of people who did not send late notices. They sent men with baseball bats. The puzzle pieces suddenly clicked together with a terrifying snap. The rush to sell the house, the desperation, the betrayal. Damon was not just greedy, he was drowning. He must have gambled away everything and borrowed from the wrong people. He was selling my life to save his own legs from being broken. I looked at the phone and realized that Skylar was likely the one pushing him. She knew about the debt. She was probably the one who suggested sacrificing the old man to pay the bill. A cold calm washed over me. Harper was right about the law, but she was wrong about me hiding. I could not go to the Bronx yet. Not tonight. I needed the black ledger. Hidden deep inside the wall of my study behind the portrait of my late wife was a small black notebook. It contained the access codes to my offshore assets, my cryptocurrency keys, and the original patent deeds to my architectural designs. If Skylar and Damon found that book, they would not just take the house, they would take my legacy. They would take the future I had built for my grandchildren, if I ever had them. That book was the only leverage I had left. It proved where the money came from, and it proved I was the only one who could access the real fortune. I started the engine of the Lincoln. I was not going to the Bronx. I checked my watch. It was nearing midnight. The house would be dark. I knew the security system better than anyone because I wrote the code for it. I knew the blind spots. I knew the ventilation shaft in the wine cellar that I had built wide enough for maintenance but never disclosed on the blueprints. Tonight, Coleman Jeffries, the respected architect, was dying, and in his place, a thief was being born. I put the car in drive and whispered to the empty street, "Enjoy the champagne, Damon, because I am coming home to crash the party." The digital clock on the dashboard of my rented sedan glowed a dull green, reading 2 in the morning. I parked 3 streets away from my own house, nestled under the shadows of a large oak tree that I had planted myself 30 years ago. The neighborhood was silent, buried under a blanket of expensive quiet that only money could buy. I pulled my black coat tighter around me and slipped a pair of leather gloves onto my hands. My heart was not racing. It was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm, like a war drum. I was not Coleman Jeffries, the retired architect tonight. I was the man who designed the fortress I was about to breach. I walked through the neighbor's hedge, avoiding the streetlights. When the silhouette of my house came into view, it looked different. It used to look like a sanctuary. Now it looked like a prison. I approached the perimeter wall at the southeast corner. This was the blind spot. When I installed the Honeywell Meridian security system 5 years ago, I purposely left a 3-foot gap in the motion sensor coverage, right here, behind the rhododendron bushes. It was a maintenance access point that only I knew about, intended for servicing the underground sprinkler pipes without triggering the alarm. I knelt in the dirt, pushing aside the thick branches. My knees popped and ached, reminding me that I was 68 years old, not 25. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a high-strength neodymium magnet I had bought at a hardware store in the Bronx. I located the sensor box hidden in the brickwork. It was a magnetic reed switch. If I placed my magnet in the exact right spot, I could trick the system into thinking the circuit was closed, even if I opened the maintenance hatch. I held my breath and placed the magnet against the cold metal. I waited for the red LED light to flash. It blinked once. Green. I exhaled. I had bypassed the outer shell. Now came the hard part. The maintenance hatch was a small steel door, barely 2 feet wide, leading into the ventilation crawl space of the wine cellar. I pulled the handle, and it groaned softly. I froze, waiting to see if any lights turned on inside the house. Silence. I slid my body into the darkness feet first. The air inside smelled of earth and old copper. It was tight, claustrophobic. I had to drag myself on my elbows, my face inches from the spider webs hanging from the galvanized steel ducts. The metal bit into my stomach, and dust filled my nostrils, making me want to sneeze. I buried my face in my sleeve to stifle the urge. I crawled for what felt like an hour, but was likely only 10 minutes. I could hear the hum of the HVAC unit vibrating through the floorboards above me. Finally, I reached the vent grate that opened into the wine cellar. I pushed it gently. It was not screwed down. Another little shortcut I had built for myself. I slid the grate aside and lowered myself onto the cool stone floor of the cellar. I was inside. The air here was different. It smelled of oak barrels and expensive vintage reds. I stood up, brushing the dust off my clothes, and moved towards the cellar door. I opened it a crack. The hallway leading to the living room was dimly lit by the moonlight streaming through the high windows. I crept down the hallway, stepping only on the edges of the floorboards where the wood was nailed down to the joists to avoid creaking. I reached the living room and ducked behind the large mahogany wet bar. I could hear them, Skylar and Gavin. They were not asleep. They were on the Italian leather sofa I had imported from Milan. I peeked over the edge of the bar. Skylar was wearing a silk robe holding a glass of champagne. Gavin, the man who was measuring my walls earlier, was shirtless, laughing at something she said. Seeing them there in the heart of my home celebrating my demise made my blood run cold. They looked like vultures, feasting on a carcass before the animal was even dead. Skylar ran her hand through Gavin's hair and said, "Do not worry about the old man. By Friday he will be in a state facility sedated out of his mind. We will have power of attorney, and this house will be listed by Monday." Gavin chuckled and kissed her neck, saying, "You are a genius, babe. I always knew you were too smart for that loser Damon." I gripped the edge of the bar so hard my knuckles turned white. They were not just stealing my money, they were laughing at my son. As much as Damon had betrayed me, hearing them mock him stung. He was a fool, but he was their victim too. Just then, I heard a sound that made my heart stop. A low growl. I froze. From the shadows of the hallway, Buster emerged. Damon's English bulldog, a 70-pound tank of muscle and teeth. Buster was territorial, and he had a bark that could wake the dead. If he barked now, it was over. The dog trotted into the room, his nose twitching. He stopped near the bar and looked right at my hiding spot. His ears went back. A low rumble started in his chest. I could not run. I could not hide. I slowly lowered my hand over the edge of the bar, palm open. It was a risk, a massive risk. I whispered a single word, soft enough that only a dog could hear. Zulu. It was the command word I used when I trained him as a puppy, a secret signal for calm and submission that Damon never used. Buster froze. He cocked his big square head. He took a step closer, sniffing my hand. The smell of the crawl space was on me, but underneath that was the scent of the man who had fed him steak scraps under the table for 5 years. The man who scratched behind his ears exactly the way he liked. The growl died in his throat. His tail gave a little thump against the floor. He licked my hand. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. I patted his head gently and pointed to his bed in the corner. "Go sleep, boy," I mouthed. Buster looked at me with those soulful brown eyes, then turned and waddled back to his bed, collapsing with a heavy sigh. Skylar looked up. "What was that?" she asked. Gavin shrugged. "Just the dog dreaming. Go back to sleep." I waited another 5 minutes until their breathing slowed and the conversation died down. Then I moved. I slipped past the living room and into the library. This was my sanctuary. The walls were lined with books on history and architecture. Above the fireplace hung a large oil painting of Lucille, my late wife. I looked at her painted eyes, feeling a pang of guilt for the mess I had let our family become. "I am sorry, Lucy," I whispered. "I am going to fix this." I reached behind the frame of the painting. My fingers found the hidden latch. The painting swung forward on silent hinges, revealing a steel wall safe. This was not a digital safe that could be hacked. It was a mechanical dial lock, a vintage piece from the 1920s that I had restored. I knew the combination by touch. Left to 42, right to 19, left to 68. The tumblers clicked softly. I turned the handle and the heavy door swung open. I reached inside. My hand closed around the cool leather of the black ledger. This book contained everything. The access codes to my encrypted offshore accounts, the deeds to the land I owned in Georgia, and the original patent filings for the structural dampening system I invented. This book was the proof that the money was mine, and that Damon had no access to it. I shoved the book into my jacket, but there was something else in the safe, a single sheet of paper lying on top of the gold coins. It was new. The paper was crisp white, not yellowed like the other documents. I pulled it out and held it up to the moonlight. It was an insurance policy, a life insurance policy on Coleman Jeffries. The coverage amount was $5 million. I scanned the terms. The beneficiary was Damon Jeffries, but my eyes locked onto a clause at the bottom that had been highlighted in yellow marker. Accidental death indemnity. The policy paid out double if the death occurred within the primary residence due to a domestic accident. My hands started to shake uncontrollably. This was dated 3 days ago. They did not just want the house. They did not just want to put me in a home. The plan was darker, much darker. If I fought the guardianship, if I refused to leave, they were going to stage an accident. A fall down the stairs, a gas leak, a fire. That was why Gavin was measuring the house. He was not measuring for renovations. He was measuring for a crime scene. They were going to kill me. The realization hit me so hard I stumbled back. My elbow knocked into a globe stand near the desk. It wobbled and tipped over. I lunged to catch it, but I was a fraction of a second too slow. The globe hit the hardwood floor with a hollow thud that echoed through the silent house like a gunshot. From the living room, Gavin's voice boomed out. "Who is there?" I heard the heavy footsteps of a man running. I heard the metallic slide of a handgun being racked. Skylar screamed, "Get the gun, Gavin!" I scrambled to my feet, shoving the paper into my pocket. I could not go back out the way I came. The vent was too slow. I looked at the French doors leading to the patio. They were locked from the inside. I could see the beam of a flashlight swinging down the hallway. I was trapped. I grabbed a heavy brass statue from the desk. It was a bust of Socrates. I had no choice. I ran to the window. I did not open it. I smashed the brass statue through the glass. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. The alarm system shrieked, instantly piercing the night. I dove through the broken window, rolling onto the patio stones. A shard of glass sliced my cheek, but I did not feel it. I heard a gunshot boom from inside the library, and a bullet chipped the stone pillar inches from my head. I scrambled up and ran. I ran like I hadn't run in 40 years. I sprinted across the lawn into the darkness of the trees, my lungs burning, my heart screaming. I did not look back. I disappeared into the night, leaving behind my home, my past, and the illusion that my family just wanted money. They wanted blood, and now the war had truly begun. My lungs were burning as I sped down the interstate, leaving the affluent silence of my old neighborhood far behind in the rearview mirror. The adrenaline from the gunshot and the escape was beginning to fade, and in its place, a cold, hard resolve was settling into my bones. I drove for 40 minutes until the manicured lawns of Long Island gave way to the gritty industrial streets of the Bronx. I pulled the car into an alleyway behind a nondescript brick building that looked like it had been abandoned since the 80s. This was perfect. To the world, Coleman Jeffries was a senile old man, wandering the streets in confusion, but in reality, I was climbing the stairs to a fortress that no one knew existed. I unlocked the heavy steel door of the fourth-floor studio apartment. The air inside was stale and smelled of dust and old paper, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I did not turn on the main lights. I moved by the glow of the street lamps filtering through the grime on the windows. I went straight to the wooden desk in the corner and brushed aside a layer of dust to reveal my backup laptop. It was a rugged, military-grade machine I had purchased years ago for site visits. I plugged it in and waited for the screen to flicker to life. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I was not just logging into email. I was accessing the root server of the smart home system I had custom-built for my mansion. Skylar and Gavin thought they had taken my castle, but they forgot that the architect always keeps a master key. The screen loaded a complex grid of camera feeds and control panels. I saw them. They were back in the living room. Gavin was putting his gun away, and Skylar was pouring another drink. They looked agitated but triumphant. They thought I had run away into the woods like a frightened animal. They had no idea that I was currently hovering over them like a ghost in the machine. I accessed the admin panel. The system asked for a password. I typed in the code. It was the date Lucille and I bought the land. Access granted. A green light blinked on my screen. I now had total control over every circuit, every valve, and every sensor in that house. I leaned back in the creaky wooden chair and cracked my knuckles. It was time to start Operation Haunting. I watched Skylar on the master bedroom feed. She looked stressed. She was pacing around the room, muttering about how the gunshot might have alerted the neighbors. She decided to take a shower to calm her nerves. I watched her walk into the bathroom and turn on the steam shower. This was a custom unit I had installed, imported from Italy with 6 body jets and a digital temperature control. She stepped inside and closed the glass door, letting the steam envelop her. I moved my cursor to the water heater settings. The digital dial showed the water temperature was set to a comfortable 104 degrees. I highlighted the number and typed in 50. Then I locked the controls. On the screen, I saw the steam begin to dissipate. Skylar paused, sensing the change. Suddenly, the jets blasted her with water that was colder than the Atlantic Ocean in January. She screamed. It was a high-pitched shriek that echoed through my laptop speakers. She scrambled to open the door, slipping on the wet tile and falling out onto the bath mat, shivering uncontrollably. I did not smile. This was not a prank. This was attrition. I wanted them uncomfortable. I wanted them on edge. I wanted them to feel like the house itself was rejecting them. I switched my attention to Damon. He was in the guest bedroom down the hall. He was sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He looked pathetic. He was rocking back and forth, murmuring to himself. I accessed the lighting control for his room. I did not just turn them off. That would be too simple. I programmed a sequence. 3 short flashes, 3 long flashes, 3 short flashes. SOS. The international distress signal. I hit enter. On the screen, the recessed LED lights above Damon's head began to blink. Short, 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 long, long, long. Damon froze. He looked up at the ceiling, eyes wide with terror. The lights paused and then repeated the sequence. Short, short, short. Damon scrambled backward, crab walking across the bed until his back hit the headboard. He was breathing hard, clutching his chest. I knew exactly what he was thinking. Lucille, his mother. She had taught him Morse code when he was a Boy Scout. He knew what it meant. He thought his dead mother was signaling him from the grave. I ramped up the pressure. I accessed the HVAC system. I cut the heat to the entire upper floor and opened the motorized skylights in the hallway just a crack. The winter air began to seep in silently, dropping the temperature rapidly. Within 10 minutes, I could see their breath misting in the air on the high-definition cameras. Skylar came storming out of the bathroom, wrapped in 3 towels, her lips blue. She marched into the guest room and found Damon cowering under the duvet. She ripped the covers off him. "Why is it freezing in here?" she screamed. "Did you forget to pay the utility bill, you idiot?" Damon looked at her with wild eyes and pointed at the lights which were still blinking their silent, desperate message. "It is Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling. "She is here, Skylar. She is watching us. She knows what we did." Skylar stared at him with pure contempt. She did not look at the lights. She looked at her husband like he was a cockroach she wanted to crush. She raised her hand and slapped him hard across the face. The sound was crisp and loud on the audio feed. "Snap out of it," she hissed. "Your mother is dead, Damon. Dead. Just like your father is going to be if he comes back here. This is just old wiring. Stop being a coward." Damon held his cheek, tears welling up in his eyes. "But the lights, Skylar. Look at the lights," he begged. She ignored him and marched over to the wall switch, flipping it up and down. The lights did not respond. They kept blinking. SOS. She screamed in frustration and kicked the wall. "Fix it," she yelled. "Go down to the basement and fix the breaker, or so help me God, I will throw you out on the street with your father." She stormed out, leaving Damon alone in the flashing cold. He was shaking violently now. He pulled his knees to his chest and started sobbing. He was muttering apologies to the air, saying he was sorry, saying he had no choice. I watched my son break down, and a part of me wanted to look away. A part of me wanted to stop the torture. But then I remembered the insurance policy. I remembered the text message he sent to his friends, laughing about turning my museum into cash. I hardened my heart. Ghosts were scary, but reality was worse. It was time to introduce Damon to the real monster in the room. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. I had already looked up Damon's credit report using the information from the Black Ledger. I knew about the debts. I knew about the maxed-out cards. But the most damning piece of information was a marker from a casino in Las Vegas that had been sold to a collection agency known for its brutality. The debt was exactly $500,000. I typed out a message. I did not sign it. I did not need to. I wrote simply, "I know about the 500 grand you lost at the Mirage. I know who holds the paper now. You are not selling the house to help your father. You are selling it to save your kneecaps." I pressed send. On the surveillance screen, I saw Damon's phone light up on the nightstand. He reached for it, wiping his tears. He unlocked the screen. I saw the exact moment the words hit him. His body went rigid. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. He dropped the phone, as if it had burned his hand. He looked around the room, his eyes darting to the corners, to the vents, to the mirrors. He realized then that this was not a ghost. Ghosts do not know about gambling debts. Someone was watching. Someone knew his darkest secret. I leaned into the microphone of my laptop. I knew the speakers in the guest room were high quality, hidden in the ceiling. I pressed the talk button. I did not shout. I whispered, my voice distorted and deep. "Checkmate, son." Damon screamed. It was a sound of pure terror. He scrambled off the bed, tripping over his own feet, and ran into the hallway, crashing into the walls as he fled from the invisible eyes that were stripping him bare. I sat back in my chair in the Bronx, listening to the chaos erupt in my stolen home. Phase 1 was complete. They were terrified. They were freezing, and they were turning on each other. But I was not done. The night was young, and I had plenty more tricks up my sleeve. The sun had barely set over the manicured lawns of Long Island when the parade of luxury cars began to line up along my driveway. From my cramped studio in the Bronx, I watched the high-definition feed on my laptop screen with a cold knot in my stomach. This was not a dinner party for friends. This was a feeding frenzy. Skylar had organized a cocktail mixer for private equity investors and cash buyers. She was not looking for a family to love the home I built. She was looking for a shark who could cut a check for $2.5 million by morning. That price was an insult. The land alone was worth $3 million. The structure, with its custom steel frame and imported marble, was worth another $4 million. She was selling my life's work for pennies on the dollar, just to get the cash and run before the legal system caught up with her. I watched Skylar glide through the patio doors, wearing a vintage Chanel dress that had belonged to my late wife, Lucille. Seeing her in that dress made my hands shake with a rage so pure it felt like fire. She had raided Lucille's closet. She was wearing my wife's pearls. She was playing the role of the grieving daughter-in-law, forced to sell the estate due to the tragic mental decline of the patriarch. She was smiling. She was pouring champagne. She was charming a group of men in Italian suits who were looking at my house the way a butcher looks at a side of beef. They were pointing at the foundation and talking about subdividing the lot. They wanted to tear down the library to build a tennis court. They wanted to gut the kitchen. Gavin was there too, playing the part of the helpful real estate broker. He was showing them the property lines, holding a tablet and nodding enthusiastically. He led the group toward the back garden, where the pride and joy of my landscape design was located. It was a sunken garden, filled with prize-winning hydrangeas and a large koi pond surrounded by limestone pavers. I had designed it as a place of meditation. Tonight, it was the stage for their treachery. I leaned closer to my screen. I could hear their conversation through the outdoor microphones hidden in the landscape lighting. One of the investors, a man with slicked back hair and a gold watch, was laughing. He said, "Honestly, if the old man is really that crazy, we might be able to get this for $2 million flat. It is a steal." Skylar laughed with him. She touched his arm lightly and said, "We just want a quick close. My father-in-law needs expensive care, and we want to make sure he is comfortable." The lie rolled off her tongue like honey. I sat back in my creaky wooden chair and cracked my knuckles. They thought they were the only ones who knew the secrets of this property. They were wrong. When I built this house 30 years ago, I was obsessed with sustainability and self-sufficiency. I had designed a complex underground water management system. There was a 10,000-gallon cistern buried under the north lawn for rainwater harvesting. But there was also a secondary emergency system connected to the septic processing unit. It was a backflow preventer valve that I had installed to divert waste in case of a city sewer collapse. It was a fail-safe mechanism that was never meant to be used in reverse. But I was the architect. I knew that if I overrode the safety protocols and reversed the pressure in the tertiary pump, I could turn the irrigation system from a water source into a weapon. I opened the command terminal on my laptop. I accessed the subsystem labeled Sanitation and Irrigation. The screen flashed a warning in red text. Critical error. Backflow hazard detected. Override recommended only in emergency. I typed in the admin authorization code. Override accepted. I watched the pressure gauges on the screen start to climb. The septic tank was full. I had not had it pumped in 3 years. The pressure built up in the pipes, rumbling silently beneath their feet. I routed the flow. Instead of the gentle mist of fresh water that usually watered the hydrangeas, I selected the high-pressure oscillating heads that lined the perimeter of the patio. These were powerful, industrial heads designed to cover 40 feet of lawn. I set the pressure to maximum. I waited. On the screen, Gavin raised his glass. He tapped a spoon against the crystal flute, calling for silence. The investors turned to look at him. Skylar beamed, standing next to him, clutching the arm of the man with the gold watch. Gavin cleared his throat. "Gentlemen," he said, "thank you for coming on such short notice. We are here to celebrate a new beginning. To the Jeffries estate, and to the lucky man who will own it by tomorrow. Cheers." They raised their glasses. The crystal sparkled in the twilight. They looked so confident, so untouchable. I hovered my finger over the enter key. I whispered to the empty room in the Bronx. "To new beginnings." I pressed the key. For a split second, nothing happened. Then a low rumble shook the ground beneath the patio. The guests looked down, confused. It sounded like a subway train passing underground. Then, with a sound like a cannon firing, the sprinkler heads popped up from the grass. It was not a mist, it was a geyser. Thick brown sludge erupted from 20 different nozzles simultaneously. The smell hit them before the liquid did. It was a wall of stench so foul it defied description. Then the sludge rained down. It sprayed in heavy, oscillating arcs, covering everything in its path. Chaos erupted. The man with the gold watch screamed as a stream of raw sewage hit him square in the chest, ruining his $5,000 suit. Skylar shrieked, dropping her champagne glass as the black filth coated Lucille's vintage Chanel dress. She tried to run, but the limestone pavers were instantly slick with slime. She slipped and went down hard, landing face first in a puddle of waste. Gavin tried to dive behind the outdoor bar, but the sprinklers were programmed to sweep the entire area. There was no escape. The investors were scrambling over each other, slipping and sliding, trying to get to the sliding glass doors, but I had already remotely locked them. They banged on the glass faces, twisted in horror, screaming to be let in. But the house was sealed. They were trapped in the open, soaking in the consequences of their greed. The smell was visible on their faces. 2 of the investors were retching over the side of the koi pond. The pristine white tablecloths of the cocktail tables were brown and dripping. The prize-winning hydrangeas were flattened under the weight of the filth. I watched with a grim satisfaction. The value of the house was plummeting with every second that passed. No one buys a house where the ground literally explodes with sewage. The stigma of this event would last for years. The environmental cleanup alone would cost hundreds of thousands. The quick sale was dead. I finally deactivated the pump. The spray sputtered and stopped, leaving the patio in dripping silence. The only sound was the retching of the guests and the sobbing of Skylar. The investors did not stay to negotiate. They did not ask for towels. They ran. They scrambled over the garden fence, ruining their Italian leather shoes in the mud, fleeing to their cars. I heard tires screeching as they peeled out of the driveway, desperate to get away from the hellhole that my home had become. Skylar pushed herself up from the ground. She was unrecognizable. Her hair was matted to her skull. The pearls were dripping. She looked around the empty garden, the ruined party, the fleeing money. She looked at Gavin, who was wiping sludge from his eyes. Then she looked up. She looked directly at the security camera mounted on the pergola. She knew. She knew this was not an accident. She knew the system was too sophisticated to fail like this on its own. She walked right up to the lens until her face filled my screen. Her eyes were wild, bloodshot, and manic. She did not look human. She looked like a demon unmasked. "I know you are watching, Cole," she screamed. Her voice was raw and guttural, tearing through the microphone. "I know it is you. You think this is funny. You think you can stop me. I will find you. I will drag you out of whatever hole you are hiding in, and I will bury you." She spat at the camera lens, blurring the image. Behind her, the back door opened. Damon stepped out. He had been hiding inside during the party, too ashamed to face the investors. He stared at his wife. He saw the filth covering her, but more importantly, he saw the rage. He heard the threat. He heard her threaten to murder his father. Skylar spun around and saw him. She did not cower. She did not apologize. She marched up to him, poking him in the chest with a sludge-covered finger. "What are you looking at, you coward?" she yelled. "This is your fault. If you had just killed him like I told you to, we would not be in this mess." Damon froze. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. If you had just killed him. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. The mask of the loving wife was gone. The mask of the victim was gone. Standing there covered in waste was the monster who had orchestrated everything. Damon took a step back, his shoes crunching on the broken glass from the night before. He looked terrified. He looked at the camera, then back at Skylar. "You wanted him dead," Damon whispered. "You told me it was just a nursing home. You said he would be safe." Skylar laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Safe," she mocked. "He is worth $5 million dead, Damon. Use your head. We are drowning in debt and you are worried about safety. Wake up." She turned and stormed back into the house, leaving muddy footprints on the white carpet. Damon stood alone in the ruined garden, the smell of rot filling his lungs. He looked up at the camera. He did not scream. He did not threaten. He just looked lost. I sat in the Bronx and closed the laptop. My hands were trembling not from fear, but from the sheer tragedy of it all. I had destroyed the party. I had saved the house from being sold, but I had just watched the final nail being driven into the coffin of my family. My son was sleeping with a murderer, and now he knew it too. The rain was hammering against the single-pane window of my Bronx apartment. It was a cold, relentless rhythm that matched the pounding in my head. Harper Steele sat across from me at the small wooden table. She did not open her briefcase immediately. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was not pity, it was fear. She slid a thick manila folder across the scratched surface of the table. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. She said, "Cole, you need to prepare yourself. We are not dealing with a gold digger. We are dealing with a serial killer." I opened the folder. The first page was a photograph of Skylar, but the name underneath was not Skylar Jeffries. It was Sarah Miller. I turned the page. There was a wedding photo dated 5 years ago. Sarah was wearing a white dress, smiling next to a man who looked to be about 70. His name was Arthur Pendergast, a retired oil executive from Texas. I turned the page again. A death certificate. Arthur Pendergast. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. Date of death, 3 months after the wedding. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty apartment. I kept reading. 2 years later, there was another marriage certificate. This time she was Sarah Vance. The groom was Robert Sterling, a wealthy antique dealer in Florida. He was 65. I flipped to the next document. Robert Sterling. Cause of death, accidental fall down a flight of stairs. Date of death, 6 months after the wedding. I looked up at Harper. My hands were trembling. She nodded slowly. In both cases, she was the sole beneficiary, she said. Both men changed their wills weeks before they died. The autopsies were inconclusive, but looking at the pattern, it is undeniable. She finds older, wealthy men. She isolates them from their families. She takes control of their finances, and then they have an accident. I slammed the folder shut. My son was sleeping next to a black widow. Damon was weak and greedy, but he was not a killer. I realized with a sick feeling in my stomach that Damon was not her partner. He was just another pawn. Once she had the money, once the house was sold and I was dead, Damon would be the next loose end to be tied up. She would stage his suicide or an overdose, and she would walk away with everything. The Jeffries legacy would be wiped off the face of the earth. I stood up and paced the small room. I have to call the police, I said. Harper shook her head. We have circumstantial evidence, Cole. We do not have proof. If we go to the police now, she will lawyer up and disappear. We need to catch her in the act. We need her to confess or make a mistake. But I could not just sit there. I could not let my son be murdered, even if he had betrayed me. I needed to wake him up. I needed him to see the monster lying in his bed. I reached into my bag and pulled out the voice modulation device I had bought online. It was a simple tool used by gamers, but effective enough to disguise my identity. I dialed Damon's cell phone. I watched the screen on my laptop monitoring the cameras in the house. Damon was in the kitchen pouring himself a glass of water. He looked terrible. His eyes were sunken and he was shaking. The stress of the last few days was eating him alive. His phone rang. He looked at it. Unknown caller. He hesitated, then answered. Hello? His voice cracked. I spoke into the modulator. My voice came out deep and robotic. I said, Listen to me carefully, Damon. You think you are in control, but you are just the next victim. Look in her bag. Look for the medicine. Who is this? Damon shouted, looking around the kitchen wildly. Who are you? Check the orange Hermes bag, Damon, I continued. Ask yourself why a healthy woman needs heart medication. Ask yourself what happened to Arthur Pendergast and Robert Sterling. Look, before it is too late. I hung up. On the screen I saw Damon stand frozen for a moment. The name, Arthur Pendergast, must have meant nothing to him, but the tone of my voice had struck a nerve. He set the glass down. He looked toward the stairs. Skylar was out. I knew this because I had tracked her GPS to a meeting with a fence in Queens where she was selling my silverware. Damon was alone. He walked slowly up the stairs. I switched the camera feed to the master bedroom. He entered the room and went to the closet. He found the orange Hermes bag on the top shelf. He pulled it down. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely work the zipper. He dumped the contents onto the bed. Lipstick, compact mirror, wallet, and a small, nondescript brown pill bottle. There was no label on it. Damon picked it up. He opened it and poured a few small white pills into his palm. He pulled out his phone and snapped a picture of them. I watched him typing furiously. He was searching for the pill markings. A moment later, he dropped the phone on the bed as if it were hot. He backed away, his hand over his mouth. I knew what he had found. Digoxin, a powerful drug for heart failure. But in high doses, it causes cardiac arrest that looks exactly like a natural heart attack. It was the perfect weapon for killing an old man with a history of heart trouble. Damon grabbed the bottle again. He was hyperventilating. He finally realized that the plan was never just to put me in a nursing home. The plan was murder, and he had signed the papers that made it possible. Suddenly, the front door chimed. The security system announced, "Front door open." Skylar was home early. Damon tried to shove the pills back into the bag, but his clumsy fingers fumbled them. The bottle rolled under the bed. The pills scattered across the duvet. He heard her footsteps on the stairs. He tried to brush the pills off the bed, but it was too late. Skylar walked into the room. She looked impeccable in a trench coat and sunglasses. She stopped dead when she saw Damon standing there with her purse overturned and white pills scattered on the sheets. She did not scream. She did not panic. She slowly took off her sunglasses and placed them on the dresser. The silence in the room was heavier than lead. Damon pointed a shaking finger at her. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Digoxin. Why do you have digoxin, Skylar? You do not have a heart condition. I looked up Sarah Miller. I saw the obituaries. You killed them. You killed your husbands. Skylar looked at him with eyes that were completely empty. There was no soul behind them. She walked over to the bed and casually picked up a pill, examining it. I did what I had to do, she said, calm as ice. They were useless old men, Damon, just like your father. They were sitting on fortunes they did not deserve. I liberated the capital. Damon backed up until he hit the wall. You are a monster, he sobbed. I am going to the police. I cannot do this. I wanted money, Skylar. I did not want to kill my dad. I am done. He made a move toward the door. Skylar did not block him physically. She just spoke 3 words that stopped him cold. Go ahead then. Damon stopped. He turned to look at her. Go to the police, Skylar said, her voice dripping with venom. Tell them everything. Tell them how you forged your father's medical records. Tell them how you signed the affidavit claiming he attacked you. Tell them how you transferred $200,000 to pay your gambling debts. Do you think they will believe you are an innocent victim? No, Damon. You are an accomplice. You are the mastermind on paper. I made sure of that. Every document has your signature, not mine. Damon slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. He looked like a child who had realized he was lost in the woods. Skylar walked over and crouched down in front of him. She stroked his cheek. Her touch made him flinch, but he did not pull away. We are in the same boat now, honey, she whispered. If I go down, you go down. And you know what happens to pretty boys like you in prison. So, wipe your face. Pick up these pills. We have a house to sell and an old man to deal with. And if you ever touch my bag again, I will make sure the next heart attack is yours. I watched from my screen in the Bronx, feeling a tear roll down my cheek. My son was not just a victim anymore. He was a hostage. He sat there on the floor, nodding slowly, defeated, broken, and completely owned by the woman who was planning to kill us both. I closed the laptop. The time for games was over. I could not wait for them to make a mistake. I had to force their hand. I had to become the bait. I sat in the dim light of the Bronx studio, staring at the blank screen of my laptop. The video feed had ended, but the image of my son Damon, slumped on the floor, completely broken by that woman, was burned into my retinas. A rage unlike anything I had ever felt before began to boil in my gut. It was not the hot, fiery anger of the night before. This was something different. It was a cold, heavy pressure that started in the center of my chest and radiated outward like cracks in a load-bearing wall. My breathing became shallow. I tried to stand up to pace the room, to work off the adrenaline, but my legs refused to cooperate. They felt like lead. Then the pain hit. It was not a sharp pain. It felt as if an elephant had just stepped onto my sternum. My left arm went numb, the sensation tingling down to my fingertips before vanishing completely. I gasped for air, but the air in the room seemed to have evaporated. I clutched the edge of the wooden table, my fingers scraping against the rough grain. My vision blurred. The room began to spin, tilting on its axis. I knew this feeling. I had felt a warning tremor like this 5 years ago, but this was the big one. This was the earthquake I had been fearing since my diagnosis. I tried to reach for my jacket, where I kept my emergency nitroglycerin pills, but my hand knocked the chair over instead. I collapsed to the floor. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I lay there on the dusty floorboards, looking at a crack in the ceiling. The irony was suffocating. Coleman Jeffries, the man who built skyscrapers, the man who survived poverty and prejudice, was going to die alone in a dirty apartment because his heart broke, literally and figuratively, over his ungrateful son. I tried to crawl toward my bag, but my body was shutting down. The edges of my vision turned black. I could hear my own heartbeat thumping erratically in my ears, like a drum missing a beat. Thump, pause. Thump, pause. I thought about Lucille. I wondered if she was waiting for me. I wondered if she would be disappointed that I lost the house she loved so much. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the darkness. The pain was unbearable now, a crushing weight that squeezed the life out of my lungs. I whispered Damon's name one last time, not in anger, but in pity. I was fading. The silence of the apartment was deafening. I was ready to let go. I was ready to stop fighting. Suddenly, a thunderous crash shattered the silence. The heavy steel door of the apartment did not just open, it was kicked in. Wood splinters flew across the room. Through the haze of my fading consciousness, I saw a silhouette framed by the hallway light. It was not a hitman sent by Skylar. It was a woman. She was short, stout, and moving with the speed of a linebacker. Martha. She rushed to my side, dropping her oversized handbag on the floor. Her face was a mask of terror and determination. "Mr. Cole," she screamed, "stay with me. Do not you dare close your eyes. Look at me." She did not waste time asking what was wrong. She knew. She had been the one reminding me to take my medication for 10 years. She ripped open my jacket, searching frantically. She found the empty pocket. She cursed a word I had never heard her say in a decade of service. She grabbed her own bag and dumped it out on the floor. Amidst the keys and tissues, she found a small, orange bottle. Her bottle. She popped the cap and shoved 2 small pills under my tongue. "Swallow," she ordered, her voice commanding and fierce. "Do not argue with me, old man. Breathe." I felt the bitter taste of the medicine dissolve. Martha grabbed my hand, squeezing it so hard her nails dug into my skin. She pulled my head onto her lap, stroking my forehead, wiping away the cold sweat that was drenching me. She started praying. She prayed loud and fast, rocking back and forth, calling on Jesus to spare this stubborn old fool. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. Slowly, the elephant stepped off my chest. The crushing weight lifted just enough for me to take a jagged breath. The numbness in my arm began to recede, replaced by a painful tingling. My vision cleared. I looked up into Martha's eyes. She was crying, silent tears streaming down her cheeks, but her jaw was set like granite. "You are not dying today," she whispered. "I did not drive across 3 boroughs like a maniac just to watch you check out. Not on my watch." I tried to sit up, but she pushed me back down. "Rest," she said. "Let the medicine work." I rasped out a question. "How did you find me?" Martha sniffed, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "You think you are the only one who knows tricks, Mr. Cole? You put a tracker in your car for theft protection. I have had the access code to that app since the day you bought the Lincoln. You gave it to me in case you ever got lost or forgot where you parked. I saw you drive to the Bronx. I saw the car sitting here for 24 hours. I knew something was wrong. You never come to this neighborhood unless you are hiding." She reached into her bag again and pulled out a bottle of water, helping me take a sip. "But that is not the only reason I came," she said, her voice dropping to a serious whisper. "I came because I found something you need to hear." I pushed myself up to a sitting position, leaning against the wall. I felt weak, but the fog was lifting. "What is it?" I asked. Martha reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a tiny black square, an SD memory card. "Yesterday, when Skylar kicked me out of the house, she told me to pack my things and go," she said. "But I did not leave right away. I went to the guest room to clean up one last time. I knew she was up to no good, so I left my digital voice recorder, the one I use for grocery lists, under the nightstand in the master bedroom. I came back this morning, pretending I forgot my coat. I retrieved it while she was in the shower. She inserted the card into a small portable player she had brought with her. She looked at me, her eyes grim. "You need to brace yourself, Mr. Cole. What is on this tape is pure evil." She pressed play. First, there was the sound of rustling fabric, then the sound of a phone dialing. Skylar's voice cut through the static, clear and arrogant. "Hello? Yes, it is Sarah. No, do not use that name. I need a rush order, the usual, but I need a higher concentration." Pause. "No, he is a big man, 220 pounds. The standard dose won't do it fast enough. I need him to go into cardiac arrest immediately. It needs to look like a massive coronary." My blood ran cold. I was listening to my own murder being negotiated. Another pause. Skylar laughed. It was a chilling sound. "Do not worry about the autopsy. He has a documented history of heart disease. My husband has already signed the affidavit regarding his declining health. No one will look twice. Just send the digoxin to the P.O. box. I will handle the rest. Oh, and double the price if you can get it here by Friday. I am tired of waiting." Click. The recording ended. The silence in the room was heavier than the air before a storm. I looked at the little black device. That was it. That was the smoking gun. Harper had said we needed proof of intent. We needed more than just circumstantial evidence of past crimes. This was Skylar caught on tape ordering a lethal dose of heart medication, specifically to kill me. Martha looked at me, fear in her eyes. "We have to go to the police, Mr. Cole. Right now. This woman is going to kill you." I took the recorder from her hand. I gripped it tight, feeling the hard plastic biting into my palm. My heart beat steady and strong, now fueled by a new kind of energy. The fear of death had vanished. In its place was a cold, calculating clarity. "If we go to the police now, she will be arrested," I said slowly. "She will get a lawyer. She will claim it is not her voice. She will drag this out for years. And in the meantime, Damon will still be liable. The house will be tied up in evidence." I looked at Martha. I looked at the dusty apartment that had almost been my tomb. "No," I said. "I am not sending her to jail yet. I am going to destroy her first. She wanted a heart attack. She wanted to play God with my life. Well, she is about to find out that I am the one who writes the script." I stood up. My legs were shaky, but they held my weight. I walked over to the window and looked out at the rain-slicked streets of the Bronx. I saw my reflection in the glass. I did not look like a victim anymore. I looked like a hunter. Martha stood up behind me. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I turned to her and smiled a smile that did not reach my eyes. "They want a funeral, Martha, so let us give them one. Get the car. We are going back to Long Island. But first we need to make a stop at the medical supply store. If Skylar wants to see a dying man, I am going to give her the performance of a lifetime." I grabbed my coat. The pain in my chest was gone, replaced by the iron will of a man who had nothing left to lose. I checked my watch. It was time to go home. It was time to die so I could finally live. The wheelchair was a rental from a medical supply store in Queens. It rattled as Harper pushed me up the long, paved driveway of my own estate. I sat slumped to the left side, my head lolling against my shoulder and my mouth slightly open. I had practiced this look in the mirror for 2 hours. The trick was to relax the facial muscles completely, until I looked like a man whose lights were on, but nobody was home. To the outside world, I was Coleman Jeffries, the stroke victim, a tragedy, a vegetable. But inside that shell, my mind was a supercomputer, running 1,000 calculations a second. Harper stopped at the iron gate. She pressed the intercom button. I could hear the static hiss before Skylar's voice cut through. "Who is it?" "It is Harper Steele. I have your father-in-law." There was a long silence. I imagined Skylar inside, staring at the monitor, trying to decide if this was a trap. I let a line of drool escape the corner of my mouth. It was degrading. It was humiliating. But it was necessary. The gate buzzed and swung open. Harper pushed me forward. The wheels crunched over the gravel. I kept my eyes unfocused, staring at nothing. But in my peripheral vision, I was scanning everything. The landscaping was ruined from the sewage explosion the night before. The grass was brown and dying. The smell of bleach hung heavy in the air, masking the stench of waste. Skylar had hired a cleaning crew, but the stain of what happened was permanent. Skylar was waiting at the front door. She was wearing latex gloves and holding a cigarette. She looked tired. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She did not look like the confident socialite anymore. She looked like a desperate criminal backed into a corner. Gavin stood behind her, his arms crossed a bulge under his jacket, indicating he was still carrying his weapon. Harper stopped the wheelchair at the foot of the steps. She put on her best performance. Her voice was flat and professional. "The hospital released him," she said. "They stabilized his heart, but the lack of oxygen during the attack caused significant cognitive damage. He is aphasic. He cannot speak. He cannot feed himself. He is essentially a toddler in an old man's body. I am his lawyer, not his nurse. I cannot take care of him, and since you filed for emergency guardianship, he is your legal problem now." Skylar walked down the steps. She stopped in front of me and waved her hand in front of my face. I did not blink. I stared past her at a dead leaf on the driveway. She leaned in close, her cigarette smoke stinging my eyes. "Is he really gone?" she asked, poking my shoulder with a sharp fingernail. "Or is he faking it?" Harper handed her a thick file of medical paperwork. "We forged these papers just an hour ago, using a template from a corrupt doctor Harper knew. Read the MRI report," Harper said. "Massive ischemic event in the left hemisphere. He is gone, Skylar. The only thing left is a heartbeat." Skylar flipped through the pages. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. She dropped her cigarette on the ground and crushed it with her heel. "Well then," she said, "bring him in. I suppose we can find a corner for him until nature takes its course." Harper pushed me up the ramp and into the foyer. The house felt different. It was cold. The furniture had been rearranged. My favorite painting in the hallway was gone, likely sold to a fence already. We moved into the living room. Damon was sitting on the sofa, staring at his hands. When he saw me, he stood up so fast he knocked over a coffee cup. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was choked with tears. He walked over and knelt beside the wheelchair. He looked into my eyes, searching for a spark of recognition. "Dad, it is me. It is Damon. Can you hear me?" I wanted to grab him. I wanted to shake him and tell him to be a man, but I did not move. I let my head roll to the other side, away from him. Damon put his face in his hands and started to sob. "Oh, stop crying, Damon," Skylar snapped. She walked over to the glass coffee table and slammed a stack of documents down on the surface. "This is a blessing. He is not in pain. He does not know what is happening. Now wipe your face. We have work to do." She grabbed a black ink pad from the table. She uncapped it and walked over to me. She grabbed my right hand. Her grip was cold and rough. She did not treat me like a person. She treated me like a rubber stamp. Harper stepped forward. "What are you doing?" she asked, feigning outrage. "I am executing the asset transfer," Skylar said calmly. "He cannot sign his name anymore, can he? So a thumbprint witnessed by 2 adults is legally binding in this state for incapacitated persons. Come here, Gavin. You are the witness." Gavin walked over, smirking. "Do it, babe," he said. "Let us own this place." Skylar pressed my thumb into the black ink. It felt wet and cold. Then she shoved the paper onto the tray of the wheelchair. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring the title of the house and all contents to Damon and Skylar Jeffries. She grabbed my wrist and jammed my thumb onto the signature line. She pressed down hard, grinding my finger into the paper until it hurt. "There," she said, lifting my hand. "Done. The house is ours." I sat there, my thumb stained black, my heart burning with a rage that could have powered a city. I let them do it. I let them violate my dignity because I knew something they did not. That ink would fade in 24 hours. It was a special compound I used for prank architectural sketches. And the paper she used was meaningless because the real deed was locked in a safety deposit box in Zurich. But they did not need to know that yet. Damon could not watch. He turned his back, his shoulders shaking. I looked at his back and thought, "Look at me, son. Watch what you have done. Remember this moment when you were sitting in a cell." Skylar was celebrating. She poured 2 drinks. She was distracted. This was my chance. The glass coffee table was right in front of me. It was a modern piece with a low profile. I needed to plant the device. I started to make a groaning sound, a low, guttural moan that sounded like an animal in pain. I started to spasm. I jerked my left arm, violently hitting the side of the table. "What is he doing?" Skylar yelled, backing away. "Is he having a seizure?" Harper stepped in, playing her part perfectly. "He gets muscle spasms," she said. "It is normal. I need to adjust him." While Harper leaned over to pretend to fix my legs, I used the cover of her body. My right hand, the one with the ink still on it, shot out like a cobra. I reached under the glass lip of the coffee table. I held a small, flat black disc. It was a military-grade listening device with a localized signal jammer breaker. I pressed it hard against the underside of the metal frame. The adhesive stuck instantly. I pulled my hand back and let it drop into my lap just as Harper stepped away. "The spasm is over," Harper said. "He needs rest. He needs to be lying down." Skylar looked at me with disgust. "I am not carrying him upstairs," she said, "and I do not want him in the guest room. He smells like a hospital." Gavin laughed. "Put him in the pantry," he said, "or the maid is room off the kitchen. It has a cot." Skylar nodded. "Perfect. Gavin, take him. Harper, you can leave. We will handle his care from here." Harper looked at me one last time. Her eyes said, "Be careful." Then she turned and walked out the front door. I was alone. Gavin grabbed the handles of the wheelchair. He did not push it gently. He shoved it. We went down the hallway fast, turning corners sharply so my head banged against the frame. He laughed every time I winced. He wheeled me into the kitchen and kicked open the door to the small storage room where Martha used to take her breaks. It was a tiny, windowless room that smelled of bleach and onions. There was a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. He spun the chair around and dumped me onto the thin mattress of the cot. I fell awkwardly, my legs tangled. Gavin stood over me. He looked at my suit, my shoes, my face. "You used to be a big shot, huh, Coleman?" he said. "Architect of the year, man of the city. Look at you now. You are just trash. And tomorrow, when the notary verifies that print, we are going to throw you in a state home so fast your head will spin." He spat on the floor next to my face. Then he walked out and slammed the door. I heard the lock click. Then I heard the sound of a heavy chair being wedged under the handle. I lay there in the dark. The silence of the room was heavy. My body ached. My thumb was stained. My dignity was shredded. But as I lay there in the blackness, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a tiny earpiece. I put it in my ear. A second later, the darkness was filled with sound. I could hear the clink of crystal glasses. I could hear the fizz of champagne. I could hear Skylar's voice crystal clear coming from the device I had just planted under the table. "To us," she said, "to $5 million, and to the old man dying in his sleep tonight." I lay in the dark and smiled. They thought they had buried me. They forgot that I was a seed. I closed my eyes and listened. Every word they said was being recorded to a cloud server. Every threat, every confession. They were digging their own graves with their mouths, and I was holding the shovel. The Trojan horse was inside the walls, and tonight the city would fall. The darkness in the storage room was absolute. It was a suffocating blackness that pressed against my eyes and filled my lungs with the chemical sting of bleach and the rot of old onions. I lay on the cot, my back screaming in protest against the thin mattress. My thumb, the one Skylar had stained with ink, throbbed with a phantom pain. To anyone looking in from the outside, I was a discarded relic locked away in a pantry to rot, while the new owners celebrated their victory. But in the dark, my mind was burning bright. I was not a prisoner. I was a spider, sitting in the center of a web, waiting for the fly to thrash. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen glowed with a dim blue light, illuminating the shelves of canned goods around me. I checked the signal strength. It was strong. The listening device I had planted under the glass coffee table was transmitting perfectly. I put the earpiece back in my ear. The sounds of the living room flooded into my head. I could hear the clinking of crystal flutes. I could hear the pop of a cork. I could hear Gavin laughing that arrogant laugh that made my skin crawl. They were celebrating the death of my legacy. They were drinking my wine and toasting to my demise. But I had one more connection to make, a bridge that needed to be built. I opened the smart home app on my phone. I navigated to the device list for the guest bedroom where Damon was staying. I found his high-fidelity Bluetooth speaker system. It was a top-of-the-line setup I had bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. I tapped into the audio routing matrix. With a few keystrokes, I bridged the input from the bug in the living room directly to the output of the speakers in Damon's room. I adjusted the volume remotely. I set it to 70%, loud enough to be impossible to ignore, but quiet enough that it would not bleed through the floorboards to the people downstairs. I imagined Damon sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall, consumed by... She was pacing. I could tell by the shifting proximity to the microphone. "Is the old man asleep?" she asked. Gavin grunted. "He is out cold." I checked the door. It is wedged tight. He is not going anywhere. Even if he wakes up, he is a vegetable. He can barely drool, let alone escape. "Good," Skylar said. "The notary is coming at 9 in the morning. We get the thumbprint notarized. Then we file the deed. By noon, the house is legally ours." Gavin laughed again, the sound of ice rattling in his glass. "And then what?" "We put him in a home like we told Damon." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence that stretched out until the air in the room felt thin. Then Skylar spoke, and her voice was devoid of all humanity. It was cold, flat, and terrifying. "No," she said. "We are not spending $3,000 a month on a nursing home. That eats into the profit margin. Besides, as long as he is alive, he is a risk. What if he recovers? What if Harper comes back with a court order? We cannot take that chance." I held my breath. Upstairs, I knew Damon was holding his breath too. "So what is the plan?" Gavin asked, his voice lowering. Skylar sighed as if she were discussing a mundane chore like taking out the trash. "We stick to the narrative," she said. "Damon is unstable. Everyone knows it. He has a gambling problem. He is desperate. The police already have the report about his debts." So Gavin prompted. "So tomorrow night, after the papers are filed, there is going to be a tragedy," Skylar continued. A terrible domestic dispute. Damon snaps. The pressure is too much. He goes into the storage room. He smothers his father with a pillow to end his suffering. A mercy killing. I gripped the edge of the cot. My knuckles turned white. And then Gavin asked, and then Skylar said, her voice sounding almost bored. Damon cannot live with the guilt. He goes to the garage. He starts the car. Or maybe he uses a rope. We will decide what looks more convincing in the moment. Either way, we find 2 bodies in the morning. A murder-suicide. The grieving widow inherits everything. Case closed. I listened to the silence that followed. It was the silence of a tomb. Upstairs in the guest bedroom, my son was listening to his wife plan his execution. He was listening to her describe his death as a line item on a spreadsheet. The woman he had lied for, the woman he had betrayed his father for, was planning to hang him in the garage like a piece of meat. Gavin whistled low and appreciative. You are cold, Sarah. That is why I love you. But what about the boy? He is going to fight back. Skylar laughed, a harsh barking sound. Damon, fight back, please. He is a coward. He has been hiding behind his father his whole life, and now he is hiding behind me. He will do exactly what I tell him, until the moment I put the noose around his neck. He is pathetic, Gavin. I almost feel sorry for him. Almost. That was it, the final straw. The moment the glass shattered. Suddenly I heard a noise from upstairs. It was not a footstep. It was a roar. It was a primal scream of rage and betrayal that shook the floorboards above my head. It was the sound of an animal that had been cornered and realized it had nothing left to lose. Damon. I heard the heavy thud of running feet. He was not walking. He was charging. He hit the stairs running. I could hear him crashing against the banister, stumbling in his haste. He was screaming Skylar's name over and over again, a guttural howl that sounded more like a wounded beast than a man. Downstairs, the conversation stopped abruptly. What the hell was that? Gavin shouted. Before Skylar could answer, the living room doors flew open. I could hear the impact through the microphone. Damon had arrived. You monster! He screamed. I heard you! I heard everything! There was a scuffle, the sound of a table being bumped, glass shattering. Damon, get back! Skylar yelled, her voice losing its cool composure for the first time. You are drunk. Go to bed. I am not drunk, Damon roared. You want to kill me. You want to kill my dad. I heard you on the speaker. You are Satan, Skylar. I am going to call the police. I am going to tell them everything. I do not care if I go to jail. I am taking you down with me. There was a metallic rasp, a sound I recognized from the kitchen. The knife block. Damon had grabbed a weapon. Stay back, he yelled. Do not come near me. Gavin's voice was calm, taunting. Put the knife down, kid. You are shaking like a leaf. You do not have the guts to use that. Try me, Damon sobbed. Just try me. I pressed the earpiece deeper into my ear, straining to hear every movement. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break down the door and help him, but I was locked in. I was helpless. I could only listen as my son fought for his life. There was a rush of movement, a shout, then a sickening thud of flesh hitting flesh, a gasp from Damon, the clatter of metal on the hardwood floor. The knife had dropped. Nice try, kid, Gavin grunted. Then came the sounds of violence, heavy, punishing blows, the sound of a fist hitting a stomach, the sound of a body being thrown against a wall. Damon cried out a sharp sound of pain that cut through my heart. He was not a fighter. He had never been in a fight in his life. He was being dismantled by a man who hurt people for a living. Stop it, Damon begged, his voice bubbling with blood. Gavin hit him again. I heard the crack of a bone, maybe a rib, maybe a nose. Damon went silent, save for the sound of wet, ragged breathing. That is enough, Skylar said. Her voice was back in control, cold and commanding. Do not kill him here. You will ruin the rug. I heard the sound of Gavin stepping back, breathing hard. Damon was on the floor, groaning. He knows, Skylar said. The idiot was listening. We cannot wait until tomorrow. The timeline has moved up. What do we do? Gavin asked. Skylar did not hesitate. Finish it, she said. Take him to the garage. Use the rope. We make it look like he got drunk, fought with you, then went out and ended it. Self-defense followed by guilt. It works. No, Damon moaned. Dad, help me. Pick him up, Skylar ordered. I heard the sound of a body being dragged, shoes squeaking on the floor. Damon was trying to resist, but he was broken. He was dead weight. Dad. Damon screamed one last time, his voice fading as they dragged him toward the kitchen door, toward the garage. "Dad, I am sorry." Then the door slammed shut. Panic tried to seize my throat, but I swallowed it down. Panic was useless. Panic was death. I reached for my watch. It was a smartwatch with a built-in cellular connection and a dedicated SOS button I had programmed for my old veteran friends. I pressed the button. I held it for 3 seconds until it vibrated. Then I stood up. I looked at the door. I was not going to wait for the cavalry. I was Coleman Jeffries. I built this house, and I knew that the drywall on the left side of the pantry shared a stud wall with the utility closet in the hallway. It was not reinforced. I grabbed a heavy can of peaches from the shelf. I wrapped it in my jacket to protect my hand. I stepped back. "Hold on, son," I whispered into the darkness. "Daddy is coming." I swung the can with every ounce of strength I had left. The drywall crunched. I swung again, and again. I was not just breaking a wall. I was breaking out of the coffin they had built. I stared at the small digital screen on my wrist and watched the green line go flat. The smartwatch I had synced with Damon's fitness tracker was no longer picking up a heartbeat. For a second, I hoped it was a glitch. I hoped the device had just fallen off his wrist during the struggle. But deep down in the pit of my stomach, I knew better. Skylar and Gavin had dragged him to the garage. They were not just scaring him. They were executing the plan Skylar had outlined with such cold precision. They were hanging my son to make it look like a suicide. Panic is a strange thing. It can paralyze you, or it can turn you into something else entirely. As I did not feel the pain in my bad leg. I did not feel the exhaustion of my heart condition. I was fueled by a father's terror. I squeezed my body through the jagged hole in the wall, tearing my suit jacket and scraping the skin off my shoulder. I tumbled out into the utility closet in the hallway. I was free from the pantry, but I was still trapped in a nightmare. The house was quiet, too quiet. Skylar and Gavin were likely already in the garage staging the scene. They thought I was locked away. They thought they had all the time in the world. I scrambled to my feet. My first instinct was to run to the garage. This was not a 911 call. This was a signal I had set up with the Brotherhood of the Beam. They were a group of retired construction workers, Vietnam vets, and old iron workers I had employed and befriended over 40 years. We played poker on Thursdays. We looked out for each other. And we had a pact. If the signal goes out, you drop everything and you come running. I stumbled down the hallway toward the front door. I needed to unlock the perimeter. I checked the app on my phone. 3 dots were moving on. They did not wait for the gate to open. I heard the screech of tires, and then the sickening crunch of metal on metal. The wrought iron gates of my estate, which cost $20,000 to install, buckled like tin foil. The lead truck simply drove through them, snapping the hinges and dragging the twisted metal up the driveway. The cavalry had arrived. I unlocked the front door and threw it open. The trucks. Wallace saw me standing in the doorway, bleeding and disheveled. It was the sound of a chair being kicked over. I screamed Damon's name. Outside, I heard the crash of Big Mike's sledgehammer hitting the exterior garage door. Glass shattered. Men were shouting. I heard Gavin's voice raised in panic. "Who the hell are you? Get back!" Then a gunshot. My blood froze. I threw myself at the interior door one last time, putting every ounce of my 68 years into the impact. The frame gave way. I stumbled into the garage. The scene before me was something out of a horror movie. The garage was dimly lit by a single overhead bulb. In the center of the room, a rope had been thrown over the exposed steel rafter. And hanging there, swinging slightly, was my son. His face was purple. His hands were tied behind his back. His feet were dangling 6 inches off the concrete floor. A tipped-over stepladder lay beneath him. Gavin was standing near the workbench, holding a pistol, looking toward the shattered exterior door where Wallace and the boys were pouring in. Skylar was cowering in the corner, screaming. I did not look at the gun. I did not look at the fight that was erupting as Wallace tackled Gavin to the ground. I only saw my son. I ran to him. I grabbed his legs and lifted with everything I had. I needed to take the weight off his neck. He was heavy, dead weight. My bad heart hammered against my ribs, threatening to explode. I pushed him up, screaming for help. Sal was there in a second. He dropped his bat and grabbed Damon's legs, helping me lift him. "Cut him down," I yelled. "Cut him down." Sal reached into his pocket and pulled out a box cutter. He scrambled up the overturned ladder. With one slash, the rope severed. Damon collapsed into my arms. We fell to the cold concrete floor together. He was not breathing. The rope had cut deep into his neck, leaving an angry red welt. His eyes were closed. I ripped the rope from around his neck. I placed my hands on his chest. I did not know if I was too late. The watch said 0, but I refused to believe it. "Come on, son," I pleaded. I pumped his chest. 1, 2, 3. "Breathe, damn you, breathe." Around me, the garage was chaos. Gavin had fired a shot but missed, and now he was pinned to the ground by 3 angry construction workers who were teaching him a lesson in pain. Skylar was trying to run out the side door, but Big Mike blocked her path, simply crossing his massive arms and shaking his head. I ignored them all. My world was the 2 square feet of concrete where my son lay dying. I pumped again. I pinched his nose and breathed into his mouth. The taste of blood and bile was on his lips. "Please, Damon," I whispered, tears streaming down my face onto his shirt. "Do not let them win. Do not leave me like this." I felt a shudder beneath my hands, a cough, then a ragged, gasping intake of air. Damon's body convulsed. He rolled onto his side, retching violently. He gasped for air, gulping it down like a drowning man. I slumped back, sitting on the floor, exhausted. He was alive. Damon coughed until his throat was raw. He tried to sit up, but he was too weak. He looked around wildly, his eyes filled with terror. He saw the construction workers standing guard. He saw Gavin bleeding on the floor. He saw Skylar cornered and weeping fake tears. Then he looked at me. He saw his father bleeding from the shoulder, shirt, torn chest, heaving. He saw the man he had tried to rob, the man he had betrayed. He reached out a trembling hand. I took it. His grip was weak, but it was there. "Dad," he rasped, his voice a broken whisper that barely carried over the noise of the sirens approaching in the distance. I squeezed his hand. "I am here, son. I am here." Damon pulled my hand to his forehead. He started to cry, deep, racking sobs that shook his entire body. "I am sorry," he choked out. "I am so sorry. I did not know. She said it was just a home." "Shh," I said, smoothing his hair back. "Save your breath." He looked at Skylar, who was now screaming at Big Mike, claiming she was a victim. Damon's eyes hardened. The fear was gone, replaced by a terrible clarity. "She did it," he whispered. "She tied the knot. She kicked the chair. She laughed, Dad. She laughed while I was choking." I nodded slowly. "I know, son. I heard." Damon tried to sit up again. "I have to tell them," he said. "I have to tell the police. Everything. The fraud, the pills, the money. I do not care what happens to me. I want her gone." I looked at my son. For the first time in years, I did not see the weak boy who hid behind his wife. I saw a man who had looked death in the face and decided to finally stand up. It was a tragic way to grow a spine, but it was there. The blue and red lights of the police cruisers finally flashed against the garage walls. The professionals had arrived to clean up the mess. Wallace walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Cole?" he asked. I looked at the chaos. I looked at the ruin of my family. I looked at my son, alive but broken. I nodded. "I am alive, Wallace. That is enough for today." The police swarmed in, guns drawn. But the fight was over. My army of old men stepped back, their job done. They had held the line. As the paramedics rushed in to put a brace on Damon's neck, he grabbed my sleeve one last time. "Dad," he whispered, "do not let her get away with it." I leaned down close to his ear. "Look at me, Damon," I said, my voice low and fierce. "Nobody gets away with anything in this house. Not anymore." I stood up and pointed a shaking finger at Skylar as the officers approached. "Arrest that woman," I said, my voice booming with the authority of a man who had rebuilt his world from the ashes. "She just tried to hang my son, and I have the recording to prove it." The sirens were deafening now, a cacophony of wailing sound that filled the garage and bounced off the concrete walls. Outside, the red and blue strobe lights painted the night in chaotic bursts of color. I stood over my son, who was still gasping for air on the floor, his neck marked by an angry purple bruise. Wallace and Big Mike had Gavin pinned in the corner, but their attention was drifting to the approaching police. We were a group of old men holding baseball bats and sledgehammers, standing over a scene of absolute carnage. To any outsider, it looked like a mob hit, not a rescue mission. Gavin spat blood onto the floor and started laughing. It was a wet, gurgling sound. "You are done, old man," he wheezed. "You think the cops are going to believe you? Look at this mess. We are the victims here. You broke into our house. You attacked us." Skylar, who had been cowering near the workbench, suddenly stood up. The fear vanished from her eyes, replaced by a cold calculation that made my blood run cold. She looked at Gavin, then at me, then at the approaching lights. She reached up with her manicured nails and clawed at her own face. She dragged her nails down her cheeks, leaving deep bleeding furrows. She grabbed the collar of her silk blouse and ripped it open, exposing her shoulder. She kicked off her heels and messed up her hair, until she looked like she had been dragged through hell. "What are you doing?" Damon whispered from the floor, his voice rasping with horror. Skylar looked down at him and smiled a twisted, broken smile. "I am writing the ending," she hissed. She ran toward the shattered garage door, screaming at the top of her lungs. "Help me! Please, God, help me! They are going to kill us!" The police swarmed the driveway. Officers in tactical gear poured out of the cruisers, guns drawn. They saw a hysterical, bleeding woman running toward them, barefoot over broken glass. They saw a group of large men standing in the shadows holding weapons. The narrative wrote itself in an instant. "Get down on the ground," the lead officer shouted, his voice amplified by a megaphone. "Drop the weapons now." Wallace looked at me. "Cole," he said, his voice tight, "this looks bad." "Drop them," I ordered. "Do not give them a reason to shoot." My friends dropped their bats and hammers. The heavy clatter of steel on concrete echoed like a surrender. We raised our hands slowly. I stood in front of Damon, trying to shield him with my body. Skylar threw herself into the arms of a young officer, sobbing uncontrollably. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "That is him!" she shrieked. "Coleman Jeffries. He is crazy. He broke out of the hospital. He and his son. They tried to kill us. They want the insurance money. Look at my face. Look what they did to me." Her performance was flawless. She was the terrified victim, the grieving wife, the survivor. The police officers tightened their grip on their weapons. The barrels of 5 service pistols were pointed directly at my chest. "Sir, step away from the boy," the sergeant commanded. "Step away slowly and keep your hands where I can see them." I tried to speak. "Officer, listen to me. She is lying. She just tried to hang him. Look at his neck." "Liar!" Skylar screamed, cutting me off. "He did that. Damon tried to hang himself because his father forced him to. I tried to stop them, and they beat me. They beat Gavin. Look at my husband. He is bleeding out." The sergeant's eyes flicked to Gavin, who was groaning on the floor, playing his part perfectly. He looked back at me, his face hardening. "Sir, I am not going to ask you again. Get on the ground, now." The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. One wrong move, one twitch, and my friends and I would be riddled with bullets. I looked at Damon. He was too weak to speak, too traumatized to defend himself. If I went down now, if I let them arrest us, Skylar would spin the story before we even got to the station. She would have the best lawyers money could buy. She would bury the evidence. She would win. I needed to end this, not with violence, but with the truth. I looked the sergeant in the eye. He was a middle-aged man with gray at his temples. He looked like a father. He looked like a man who valued order. "I am going to get on the ground, Sergeant," I said, my voice calm and steady despite the gun pointed at my heart. "I am going to comply. But before you cuff me, before you take the word of that woman, I need you to do one thing." "Shut up. Get down," the officer yelled, taking a step closer. I stood my ground. My hands were still raised, palms open. I did not move an inch. "Just look up," I said. "Look at the ceiling." The sergeant frowned, confused by my refusal to panic. "What?" "The ceiling?" I repeated. "The projector." Skylar stopped crying for a fraction of a second. Her eyes darted to the ceiling of the garage. She saw nothing but steel rafters and lights. She thought I was bluffing. She thought I was senile. "He is crazy," she yelled. "Just shoot him. He has a gun." I saw a gun. The officers tensed, fingers tightening on triggers. I did not flinch. I did not look at Skylar. I kept my eyes locked on the sergeant. "Officer," I shouted, my voice booming with the authority of a man who had commanded construction sites for 40 years. "I am the architect of this house, and I am telling you to look at the north wall." I nodded my head toward the large white wall above the workbench. "Alexa," I commanded, my voice clear and loud. "Play file evidence 1. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Skylar let out a short, nervous laugh. "Nothing works in this house," she said. "It is broken, just like him." Then, a low hum filled the garage. From a hidden compartment in the ceiling, a high-definition laser projector whirred to life. A beam of bright light cut through the gloom, hitting the white wall. The image that appeared was crystal clear. It was a video feed from 20 minutes ago. The garage fell silent. The police officers did not lower their guns immediately, but their eyes drifted to the screen. On the wall, in 10-foot high resolution, Skylar was standing over Damon. She was not crying. She was not bleeding. She was holding a rope. She was tying a noose with steady, practiced hands. The audio boomed through the garage speakers. "Make it tight, Gavin," she said on the video, her voice echoing around us. "I want his neck to snap instantly. We do not want him thrashing around and making a mess." The sergeant lowered his gun slightly. His mouth opened. The video continued. It showed Gavin dragging Damon to the ladder. It showed Damon begging for his life, screaming for me. It showed Skylar laughing as she kicked the ladder away. Then the video cut to a split screen. The second angle showed the living room from earlier. It showed Skylar talking on the phone, ordering the poison. It showed her telling Gavin how she killed her previous husbands. The silence in the garage was absolute. The only sound was the real Skylar's ragged breathing as she watched her own monstrous reflection on the wall. The mask had not just slipped, it had been shattered into a million pieces. The sergeant slowly holstered his weapon. He turned to look at Skylar. She was backing away, shaking her head, her hands trembling. That is deepfake," she stammered, her voice rising in pitch. "It is AI. He made it. He is a genius with computers. You cannot believe that." The sergeant looked at her torn clothes. He looked at the scratches on her face. Then he looked back at the video, where she was standing pristine and cold-blooded, watching a man die. "Ma'am," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth, "put your hands behind your back." Skylar let out a shriek of pure rage. She lunged, not at me, not at the police. She lunged at Damon, who was still lying on the floor. If she was going down, she was going to finish the job. But she never made it. Big Mike stepped forward, and with a gentle shove that looked like he was swatting a fly, he sent her sprawling onto the concrete. 2 officers were on her in a second. The click of handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I lowered my hands. My knees felt weak. Wallace stepped in and held me up. "You okay, Cole?" he asked. I looked at the screen where the evidence of my victory was playing on a loop. I looked at my son, who was finally safe. I nodded. "I am okay, Wallace. Tell the sergeant to check the cloud server. There is about 40 hours of this. I think they are going to need a lot of popcorn." The barrel of the sergeant's service pistol was steady, pointed directly at the center of my chest. I could see the rifling inside the muzzle. I could see the tension in his knuckles as his finger hovered millimeters from the trigger. One wrong move, one twitch from me or one shout from Skylar, and my life would end right here on the concrete floor of the garage I built with my own hands. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and sweat, mixed with the metallic tang of fear. Skylar was still screaming behind the officers, her voice a shrill siren of lies, begging them to shoot the madman. She played her role perfectly. She was the battered wife. I was the monster. I looked at the sergeant. His eyes were hard, but there was a flicker of doubt in them. He was a seasoned officer, and something about this scene did not sit right with him. Perhaps it was the fact that I was not holding a weapon. Perhaps it was the calm resignation on my face. Or perhaps it was the sheer desperation in Skylar's performance, which was beginning to crack at the edges. I knew I had one chance. I did not have a gun. I did not have a knife. But I had this house. I had the miles of copper wire and fiber optic cables running through the walls like veins. I had the brain of the smart home system that heard everything and saw everything. I took a slow breath. I did not raise my hands any higher. I did not drop to my knees. Instead, I raised my chin and spoke to the empty air above the sergeant's head. My voice was not a plea. It was a command. "Alexa, play the truth." The sergeant blinked, confused by the strange order. He tightened his grip on the gun, expecting a trap. "Stay down," he shouted. I said, "Get down." But before he could step forward, a mechanical hum filled the garage. It was a low, powerful vibration that seemed to come from the very bones of the structure. The ceiling panels above the workbench slid open with a smooth, hydraulic hiss. Skylar stopped screaming. She looked up, her eyes widening in genuine terror. She knew that sound. She knew what was hidden up there. Slowly, majestically, a massive 100-inch projection screen descended from the rafters. It unrolled like a white flag of war, hanging suspended in the dusty air of the garage. At the same time, the overhead lights dimmed automatically, plunging the room into a twilight gloom. The only light came from the tactical flashlights mounted on the police weapons, and the glowing standby light of the laser projector that had just emerged from its housing. "What is this?" Skylar shrieked, her voice cracking. "Shoot him! He is activating a weapon! Shoot him now!" But the police did not shoot. Curiosity is a powerful instinct. They watched the screen. The sergeant lowered his weapon just an inch, his eyes drawn to the white canvas. The projector flared to life. A beam of pure white light cut through the darkness, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The speakers mounted in the corners of the garage cracked with static, and then the audio kicked in. It was crystal clear. It was loud. It was the voice of the devil herself. The video that appeared on the screen was high definition. It was a split-screen view, streaming directly from the cloud server where I had been uploading the evidence for the last 48 hours. On the left side of the screen was the footage from the living room camera, recorded earlier that evening. On the right side was the feed from the camera hidden under the glass coffee table. The video began to play. The image on the left showed Skylar sitting on the sofa, holding a glass of wine. She looked relaxed. She looked bored. The timestamp in the corner showed it was 3 hours ago. Her voice boomed through the garage speakers, echoing off the concrete walls. "We stick to the narrative," she said on the screen. Damon snaps. He smothers his father with a pillow, a mercy killing. And then Damon cannot live with the guilt. He goes to the garage and hangs himself. The officers in the room stiffened. The sergeant's gun lowered another inch. He looked from the screen to the woman standing behind him. Skylar was frozen. She was staring at her own face on the wall, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The video continued. It cut to the scene in the kitchen. It showed Gavin punching Damon. It showed the brutality of the assault. The sound of the fist hitting flesh was sickeningly loud in the enclosed space. The police watched as Gavin, the man currently groaning on the floor, pretending to be a victim, beat my son until he could barely stand. Then came the audio from the garage, just minutes before the police arrived. "Make it tight, Gavin," Skylar's recorded voice said. "I want his neck to snap instantly. We do not want him thrashing around." The sergeant turned his head slowly. He looked at Damon, who was sitting on the floor, rubbing his bruised neck. He looked at the rope mark. Then he looked at Skylar. The doubt in his eyes was gone, replaced by a dawning horror. But I was not done. The video was not finished. "Wait," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "Watch the end." The video on the screen shifted. It showed a timestamp from exactly 3 minutes ago. It was the feed from the garage security camera, the one hidden behind the tool rack. It showed the moment the police sirens were first heard in the distance. On the screen, Skylar stood in the middle of the garage. She looked fine. Her clothes were intact. Her face was unblemished. Then the officers watched as she looked at Gavin and nodded. They watched as she reached up with her own hands. The entire garage watched in stunned silence as the woman on the screen drove her fingernails into her own cheeks. They watched her drag them down, tearing her own skin, creating the bloody furrows she was currently wearing. They watched her grab her blouse and rip the buttons off, exposing her shoulder. They watched her kick off her shoes and ruffle her hair. It was a masterclass in manipulation. It was the creation of a victim in real time. The video froze on the final frame. Skylar standing there looking deranged, ready to run out to the police. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man. It was the silence of absolute truth. There was no spinning this. There was no explaining it away. The visual evidence was irrefutable. The sergeant slowly holstered his weapon. The click of the safety latch engaging was the loudest sound in the room. He did not look at me. He did not look at his men. He turned his entire body towards Skylar. The other officers followed his lead. 5 guns that had been pointed at me were now lowered. 5 pairs of eyes turned to the woman standing by the door. Skylar looked around the room. She looked at the screen where her guilt was frozen in 10-foot-high pixels. She looked at the police. She looked at Gavin, who had stopped groaning and was now staring at the floor, knowing it was over. Then she looked at me. Her face crumpled. But it was not into tears. It was into pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask was gone. The socialite was gone. The grieving widow was gone. All that was left was a cornered rat. "You bastard," she screamed. It was a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "You old dead bastard." She lunged. She did not run for the door. She did not run for the police. She ran at me. Her hands were curled into claws. Her teeth were bared. She wanted to kill me. She wanted to tear my throat out with her bare hands. She moved fast, fueled by adrenaline and madness. The police were caught off guard by the sheer ferocity of her attack. She sprinted past the sergeant. She sprinted past Damon, who flinched away. She was 5 feet from me, 4 feet. I braced myself, ready to take the hit. But she never reached me. From the shadows near the tool bench, a figure stepped out. It was Martha, my housekeeper who had followed the police cars in her old sedan, who had slipped into the garage unnoticed during the chaos, stepped into the light. She did not use a weapon. She did not shout. She simply extended her leg. It was a move of beautiful simplicity. Skylar was moving too fast to stop. Her shin hit Martha's heavy work boot. She went airborne. It was almost comical. Skylar flew through the air, arms flailing, and hit the concrete floor face first with a sickening smack. She slid 3 feet, coming to a stop right at my shoes. She groaned, trying to push herself up, spitting blood from a split lip. Before she could rise, a knee dropped into her back. The sergeant was on her. "Give me your hands," he shouted. "Give them to me now." Skylar thrashed, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. But it was over. The sergeant grabbed her wrists and pulled them behind her back. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting tight echoed through the garage. It was a sound of finality. It was the sound of justice. The sergeant pulled her to her feet. She was covered in dust, blood, and defeat. She looked at me one last time. There was no remorse in her eyes, only a promise of vengeance. I looked back at her. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just stood there tall and unbroken. "Get her out of my house," I said quietly. 2 officers grabbed her by the arms and began to drag her toward the open door. As they passed, Martha Schuyler spat at her. Martha did not flinch. She just smoothed her apron and looked at the woman who had tried to kill her employer. "Trash day is tomorrow," Martha said, her voice calm and steady. "But I guess we are starting early." I watched them drag Schuyler out into the night toward the flashing lights of the cruisers. I looked at the screen where the truth was still shining bright. I looked at Damon, who was weeping softly in the corner. The war was over. The house was still standing, and so was I. The fluorescent lights of the county jail visitation room buzzed with a low electrical hum that sounded like a headache waiting to happen. It had been 3 weeks since the night the police dragged Skylar and Damon out of my garage. 3 weeks of legal depositions meetings with prosecutors, and the slow, painful process of putting my shattered life back together. I sat on a metal chair bolted to the floor, staring at the scratched surface of the steel table. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. It was a cold, sterile place, designed to strip away human dignity, and it was doing a fine job. The heavy steel door on the other side of the room buzzed and clanked open. A guard stepped in, followed by a man in an orange jumpsuit. It took me a moment to recognize my own son. Damon looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him. His head was shaved, a standard procedure for lice prevention that stripped him of his vanity. He had lost weight. His eyes were sunken deep into his skull, surrounded by dark bruises that were fading to a sickly yellow. He walked with a shuffle, his shoulders hunched, as if expecting a blow to land at any moment. He sat down across from me. He did not look me in the eye. He stared at his hands, which were resting on the table clasped together to stop them from shaking. The guard took up a position by the door, arms crossed, watching us. We were allowed a contact visit because my lawyers had pulled strings, citing urgent legal matters regarding his defense strategy. Damon finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and watery. He looked like a child who had broken a window and was waiting for the punishment. "Dad," he whispered, his voice raspy and thin. I did not answer. I just looked at him. I looked for the boy I had raised. I looked for the young man who used to help me carry blueprints. I looked for the son I had loved, but I could not find him. All I saw was a stranger wearing my son's face. A stranger who had stood by while his wife planned my murder. Damon took my silence as an invitation to speak. He leaned forward, desperate. "Dad, I am so sorry. I know I said it before, but I mean it. I wake up every night screaming. I see you on the floor. I see the rope. I was so stupid. She twisted everything. She told me we were just protecting the assets. She promised nobody would get hurt until the end. I was scared, Dad. I was scared of her. I was scared of the debt. Please, you have to believe me." He started to cry. It was not the dignified weeping of a man who accepts his fate. It was the messy, snotty sobbing of a coward who wants to be saved. He reached across the table, trying to touch my hand. I pulled my hand back slowly, placing it in my lap. Damon flinched as if I had slapped him. I finally spoke. My voice was calm, level, and completely devoid of warmth. "I did not come here for an apology, Damon. Apologies are for stepping on someone's foot. They are not for conspiracy to commit murder." Damon wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Then why are you here?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Did you come to watch me rot?" I reached into my briefcase, which the guards had searched thoroughly before I entered. I pulled out a plain white envelope and placed it on the table. "You are in a lot of trouble, Damon," I said, "and I am not talking about the law. I am talking about the $500,000 you owe to the syndicate in Las Vegas." Damon went pale. He looked around the room as if the loan sharks were hiding in the shadows. "How do you know about that?" he whispered. "I know everything," I said. "I know that they sold your debt to a collection crew inside this very prison. I know that the price on your head is active. You have maybe 48 hours before someone shivs you in the shower or puts poison in your food tray. You are a walking dead man." Damon began to hyperventilate. His chest heaved up and down. "Oh God, oh God. Dad, help me. Please do not let them kill me. I will do anything." I slid the envelope across the table. "Inside that envelope is a cashier check made out to the holding company of the syndicate," I said. "It pays your debt in full, including the vigorish. I made the call this morning. The hit has been called off. You are safe from the sharks." Damon grabbed the envelope, clutching it to his chest like a life preserver. "Thank you," he sobbed. "Thank you, Dad. I knew you would not let me die. I knew you still loved me." I held up a hand, stopping him. I reached into my briefcase again. I pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. "This is a retainer agreement," I continued. "I have hired Marcus Thorne to represent you. He is the best criminal defense attorney in the state. He specializes in coerced accomplices. He is going to argue that you were psychologically manipulated and abused by a sociopath. He is going to push for a plea deal. Instead of 20 years for conspiracy to commit murder, you will likely get 5 years for fraud and accessory. With good behavior, you could be out in 3. Damon looked at the document, tears streaming down his face. He was smiling now, a pathetic, hopeful smile. He thought this was it. He thought this was the moment of reconciliation. He thought his father had come to save him, to fix his mess, just like I had done when he crashed his car in high school or failed his college exams. "You are the best father in the world," he blubbered. "I do not deserve you. I promise when I get out, I will make it up to you. I will come home and I will take care of the house. I will work for you. We can start over." I looked at him and felt a deep, hollow ache in my chest. It was the death of hope. He still did not understand. He thought money was love. He thought safety was forgiveness. I reached into my briefcase one last time. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not thick like the legal contract. It was just a standard letter printed on my personal stationery. I placed it on the table in front of him. Damon looked at it, confused. "What is this?" he asked. "Read it," I said. Damon wiped his eyes and looked down. He read the header. "Notice of disownment and termination of relationship." His head snapped up. "What?" "Read the rest," I commanded. Damon read aloud, his voice shaking. "I, Damon Jeffries, hereby acknowledge that my debts have been paid and my legal defense provided for by Coleman Jeffries. In exchange for these considerations, I agree to voluntarily terminate all legal and personal claims to the Jeffries estate, name, and lineage. I agree to never contact Coleman Jeffries again. I agree that upon my release, I will relocate to a distance of no less than 500 miles from his residence. I acknowledge that I have no father." Damon dropped the paper. He looked at me with horror. "Dad, you cannot be serious. This is a joke, right? You are saving my life. Why would you save me just to throw me away? I leaned forward, my eyes locked onto his. I am saving your life because I am a human being, I said. I would not let a dog die the way they wanted to kill you. And I am paying for your lawyer because I do not want the Jeffries name dragged through a murder trial any more than it has to be. But make no mistake, Damon, I am not saving my son. My son died the night he watched his wife mix poison and said nothing. My son died the night he stood in the garage and watched a rope being tied. Damon sobbed, reaching for me. No, Dad, please. I was scared. I am your flesh and blood. Blood is biology, I said, cutting him off. Family is loyalty. You broke the contract. You sold me out for a woman who wanted me dead. You watched her dig my grave and you handed her the shovel. There is no coming back from that. I took a pen from my pocket and set it down on the paper. Sign it, I said. Sign it and you live. You get a lawyer. You get a second chance at life. But you get it as Damon Smith or Damon Jones or whatever name you choose, not as Damon Jeffries. Damon stared at the pen. He looked at the check that saved him from the mob. He looked at the lawyer contract that saved him from a life sentence. And he looked at the paper that severed him from the only person who had ever truly loved him. He realized then that there was no negotiation. The man sitting across from him was not the soft-hearted father he had manipulated for years. This was the architect, the man who built steel structures that did not bend. Damon picked up the pen. His hand shook so violently he could barely hold it. He cried silent tears that dripped onto the paper, leaving wet spots on the white surface. He looked at me one last time, hoping for a reprieve, hoping for a nod, a wink, anything. I gave him nothing. I sat like a statue. Damon lowered the pen. He scratched his signature across the bottom line. It was messy and jagged. I reached out and took the papers. I put the disownment letter in my folder. I left the check and the lawyer's contract with him. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I picked up my briefcase. Dad, Damon whispered. I did not answer. I turned my back on him. Dad, please say something, he begged, his voice cracking. Just tell me you love me, one last time. I stopped at the door. I did not turn around. I spoke to the steel frame. I loved the boy you were, I said. But that boy is gone. Goodbye, Damon. I knocked on the door. The guard opened it. I walked out into the hallway and heard the heavy steel door clang shut behind me, sealing my son in his box and sealing me in my freedom. I walked down the long corridor, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I breathed air that felt clean. It was over. The branch had been cut. The tree could finally heal. The rain outside the county jail was not cleansing. It was cold, hard, and gray, beating down on the pavement like a rhythmic punishment. I walked out of the heavy steel doors, my coat pulled tight around my neck, but the chill I felt had nothing to do with the weather. I had just signed the papers that legally severed my son from my life. I had saved him from death, but I had condemned him to a life of exile. As I walked toward my car, the water dripped from the brim of my hat, mixing with the tears I refused to let fall. I sat in the driver's seat of the Lincoln and just gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles were white. The engine roared to life, a powerful sound that felt mocking in the silence of my soul. I had won. That is what the lawyers said. That is what the police said. I had defeated the conspiracy. I had protected my assets. I had sent the villains to prison. But as I drove back toward the estate, the word victory tasted like ash in my mouth. The drive was a blur. When I turned into the driveway, the first thing I saw was the twisted metal of the front gate. It was still lying on the grass where Wallace and the boys had rammed it. It looked like the bones of a dead animal. I parked the car and walked up the steps. The front door had been repaired, but the wood was still splintered around the frame. I unlocked it and stepped inside. The house was silent. It was not the peaceful silence of a library. It was the dead silence of a tomb. The furniture was still there. The paintings were still there. But the life was gone. I walked into the living room. I saw the spot on the rug where Gavin had knocked over the wine. I saw the coffee table where I had planted the bug. Every corner of this house, which I had designed with such love, was now a crime scene. It was a museum of betrayal. I walked to the kitchen. It was empty. I walked to the garage. The police tape was still fluttering near the workbench. I stared at the rafter where the rope had hung. I could still see my son's feet dangling. I could still hear his gasping breath. I fell to my knees on the concrete floor. A scream built up in my chest, a primal roar of grief and rage, but it came out as a broken sob. I had cut out the cancer, but I had lost a limb in the process. I was 68 years old. I was alone, and I was living in a house that screamed my failures back at me. I stayed there on the cold floor for a long time, letting the ghosts of the last 3 weeks wash over me. I realized then that I could not stay here. This place was poisoned. It was too big, too quiet, and too full of memories that had turned into nightmares. I stood up and brushed the dust off my knees. I walked back into the study. I sat down at my desk and pulled out my contact book. I found the number for a real estate broker. Not Gavin, obviously, but a reputable firm in the city. I was going to sell it, all of it. The land, the house, the furniture. I would take the money and move to a small apartment in the city. I would disappear. I would become the anonymous old man I had pretended to be. I picked up the phone. My finger hovered over the dial pad. I just wanted to be done. I wanted to erase the Jeffries legacy before it destroyed whatever was left of me. Just as I was about to press the call button, the door to the study opened. It was Martha. She was carrying a plastic laundry basket, but it was not filled with clothes. It was filled to the brim with envelopes. White envelopes, brown envelopes, large padded packages. It was overflowing. She walked in and dumped the basket on my desk, right on top of the phone. "What is this, Martha?" I asked, rubbing my temples. "I am not in the mood for mail. Just throw it out. Burn it. I do not care." Martha did not move. She stood there, her arms crossed over her chest, looking at me with that stern expression that had kept me in line for a decade. "You are not burning this, Mr. Cole," she said. "You need to look at it." I sighed, pushing the pile away. "It is probably hate mail, Martha, or reporters wanting a quote. The story was on the news. I am the crazy architect who bugged his own house. I do not want to read it." "It is not hate mail," she said softly. I looked at her. Her eyes were wet. "Since the story broke, since the police released the footage of Skylar confessing, people have been finding out where you live," she continued. "This is just from this morning. The postman said there is more coming tomorrow." I picked up the top envelope. It was handwritten. The handwriting was shaky, spider-like script written in blue ink. The return address was from a nursing home in Ohio. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. "Dear Mr. Jeffries," the letter began, "I saw your story on the news last night. My name is Eleanor. I am 82 years old. 3 years ago, my son and his wife convinced me to sign over my house. They said it was for tax purposes. They said I could live there until I died. 2 months later, they put me in this home. They sold the house and bought a boat. I have not seen them since. I thought I was stupid. I thought I was alone. But then I saw you fighting back. I saw you standing in that garage, and for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. Thank you for showing the world that we are not just trash to be thrown away." I put the letter down. My hands were shaking. I reached for another one. This one was from a veteran in Texas. "Sir, I am a retired Marine. My daughter stole my pension. She forged my signature while I was in the hospital, recovering from surgery. I gave up. I let her take it because I was too tired to fight. But watching you take down that woman, watching you save your son, even after what he did, it woke something up in me. I called a lawyer this morning. I am going to get my pension back. Semper Fi." I read another, and another. A widow in Florida whose caregiver was stealing her jewelry. A grandfather in Chicago whose grandson was using his identity to open credit cards. The basket was full of pain. It was a chorus of voices crying out from the shadows. Voices of people who had built this country, who had raised families, and who were now being discarded by the very people they nurtured. I read for hours. The sun went down and the room grew dark, but I did not turn on the light. I sat in the glow of the street lamp outside, reading the stories of strangers. I felt their shame. I felt their betrayal. But mostly I felt their hope. They were not writing to ask for money. They were writing to say thank you. They were writing because I had done something they thought was impossible. I had won. I looked around the dark study. The house did not feel empty anymore. It felt crowded. It was filled with the spirits of Eleanor and the Marine and the thousands of others who were suffering in silence. I realized something in that moment. My fight was not over. It had just begun. I had treated my situation like a personal tragedy, but it was actually a symptom of a disease that was rotting the roots of our society. I looked at the phone. I looked at the contact number for the real estate broker. I realized that running away was the coward's way out. Selling this house would be an insult to every person who had written these letters. This house was a fortress. I had designed it to be impenetrable. I had filled it with technology that could expose the truth. Why would I sell it? Why would I abandon the high ground? I stood up. My knees popped, but I did not feel old. I felt dangerous. I felt the same fire I had felt when I broke through the pantry wall. I picked up the broker's number. I crumpled it into a ball. Then I picked up the draft contract I had prepared for the sale. I ripped it in half. The sound of tearing paper was loud in the quiet room. I ripped it again and again until it was nothing but confetti raining down into the basket of letters. Martha was standing in the doorway watching me. She had not left. She knew me better than I knew myself. "You are not selling, are you?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. I looked at her. I looked at the basket of letters. I looked at the blueprints on the wall, the designs of the skyscrapers I had built. I was an architect. I built things that lasted. I built foundations that could weather the storm. I was not done building. "No, Martha," I said, my voice strong and steady. "I am not selling. This house is not a home anymore. It is a headquarters." "Headquarters for what?" she asked. I picked up the letter from Eleanor in Ohio. "For justice," I said. "These people need help. They need lawyers. They need investigators. They need someone who knows how to fight dirty when the law is too slow. They need a wolf." I walked over to the window and looked out at the broken gate. I was going to fix it, but I was going to make it stronger. I was going to turn this estate into a beacon. "Martha," I said, turning back to her, "make a pot of coffee, make it strong, and call Harper. Tell her to get over here. Tell her to bring her team. You want to work tonight?" she asked, checking her watch. "It is almost midnight." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in months. "The bad guys do not sleep, Martha," I said. "So neither do we. We have work to do. The seasons have changed 4 times since the night the police dragged my family out of the garage. The winter snow that covered the tracks of the police cruisers melted into spring rain, and the summer heat has now given way to the crisp golden light of another autumn. I am standing on the balcony of the master bedroom, the same balcony where I once watched my son leave for the airport, and I am looking down at the driveway. It is no longer empty, and it is certainly no longer quiet. The iron gates that Wallace and the boys smashed down are gone, replaced by wide open brick arches that welcome visitors from sunrise to sunset. A bronze plaque mounted on the stone pillar reads, "The Jeffries Legal Defense Fund, Justice for the Forgotten." The driveway is filled with cars, not the luxury sedans of investors looking to flip a property, but the rusted sedans and pickup trucks of people who have nowhere else to turn. I see a young woman helping her grandmother out of a taxi. I see a veteran walking with a cane clutching a manila envelope. They are coming here because they heard the story of the architect who fought back. They are coming because this house is no longer a monument to my vanity. It is a fortress for their protection. I walk downstairs. The living room where Skylar once drank my wine and plotted my death has been transformed. The expensive Italian sofas are gone. In their place are rows of desks, computers, and filing cabinets. The air buzzes with the sound of phones ringing and the murmur of serious conversations. Harper Steele is standing in the center of the room, directing a team of paralegals and junior attorneys. She looks up and smiles at me. "We are not just fighting guardianship fraud anymore. We are fighting predatory lenders, abusive nursing homes, and corrupt family members who think the elderly are easy targets. We are winning cases that everyone said were impossible." Martha walks past me carrying a tray of coffee. She is technically still my housekeeper, but in reality, she is the heart of this operation. She knows every client by name. She holds the hands of the widows while they tell their stories. She stops and hands me a mug. Black 2 sugars, just the way I like it. She does not need to ask how I am doing. She sees the light in my eyes. I am tired, yes. My heart condition is still there, ticking away like a clock on the wall. But I am not dying. For the first time in years, I am truly living. I walk through the bustling office and into my private study. I close the door, muffling the noise of the crusade outside. On my desk there is a single file folder. It is not a legal case. It is a report from the private investigator I hired to keep tabs on the loose ends of my past life. I sit down and open it. The photos are grainy, taken from a distance, but the reality they depict is sharp and unforgiving. Skylar, also known as Sarah Miller, is currently incarcerated at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. The report says her appeal was denied last week. The judge cited the overwhelming digital evidence and the premeditated nature of her crimes. She is serving 20 years without the possibility of parole. The photo shows her in the prison yard. Her hair is gray and stringy. Her face is lined with bitterness. The beauty she used as a weapon has rotted away, leaving only the ugly truth underneath. She spends her days working in the prison laundry, earning 12 cents an hour. It is a fitting wage for a woman who tried to steal $5 million. I turn the page. Gavin, the muscle, the enforcer, is in a medium security prison upstate. He took a plea deal, testifying against Skylar, to shave 5 years off his sentence. He is serving 15 years. The report says he has lost 2 teeth in a prison fight. He is no longer the tough guy who beat my son. He is just another number in the system, a bully who found out that there are always bigger fish in the sea. Then I turn to the final page. This is the one that makes my hand hesitate. There is no mugshot here. There is a photo of a diner in a small town in Ohio, 500 miles away. Through the window, you can see a man wiping down tables. He is wearing a stained apron. He looks older than his 33 years. His shoulders are slumped. It is Damon. My son is not in prison. He is in purgatory. The plea deal I bought for him kept him out of a cell, but the disownment papers I made him sign put him in a different kind of cage. He lives in a studio apartment above a garage. He works double shifts as a waiter. He has no friends. He has no family. The report says he goes to work, he goes home, and he sits alone. He sends a letter to this house on the 1st of every month. The letters are always the same. They apologize. They ask for a second chance. They ask if I am okay. I look at the stack of unopened envelopes in the corner of my desk. I do not burn them anymore. I simply file them away, unread. It is a cruelty, I know, but it is a necessary one. Damon is safe. He is alive. He is free from the sharks and the killers. That was my gift to him. But my presence in his life is a privilege he forfeited. He needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet, even if those feet are tired from standing on a diner floor. Perhaps one day, years from now, when he has built a life of his own making, we might speak. But not today, and not tomorrow. I close the file. The past is accounted for. The debts are paid. I stand up and walk out the back door into the garden. The sewage that destroyed the lawn has long been cleaned away. The hydrangeas are blooming again, vibrant blue and purple heads nodding in the breeze. In the center of the patio, sitting at a stone chess table, is a young boy. His name is Malik. He is 12 years old. He is the grandson of one of my clients, a woman whose house we saved from foreclosure last month. Malik is sharp. He has eyes that see everything. I sit down opposite him. The board is set. He is playing black. I am playing white. "Your move, Mr. Cole," Malik says, studying the board with intense concentration. I move my knight, protecting my king. I look at the boy. I see the potential in him. I see the hunger to learn. I see the future. "Why did you sacrifice that pawn?" Malik asks, pointing to a piece I let him take 3 moves ago. I lean back in my chair, feeling the sun on my face. "Because, Malik, sometimes you have to lose something small to save something big," I say. In chess and in life, you cannot hold on to everything. If you try to protect every piece, you will lose the game. You have to know what is vital. You have to know what is worth fighting for. Malik nods, absorbing the lesson. He moves his rook. "Mr. Cole," he asks without looking up, "do you miss your son?" The question hangs in the air. It is innocent and brutal. I look at the house behind me. I hear the voices of the people inside working to save strangers. I think of the empty seat at my dinner table. I pick up my queen. I look at the ivory carving. "I miss the idea of him, Malik," I say softly. "I miss the memory. But memories are ghosts, and you cannot build a future on ghosts." I place the queen down on the board with a solid click. "Checkmate," I say. Malik looks at the board. His eyes widen. He traces the lines, realizing he is trapped. He smiles, a genuine, bright smile. "You got me," he says. "You always win." I look at the boy. I look at the garden. I look at the scars on my hands and the peace in my heart. Blood is random, Malik. We do not choose who we are related to. But family is a choice. It is the people who stand by you when the walls are falling down. It is the people who respect you enough to tell you the truth. I chose to keep my dignity instead of a toxic bloodline. I stand up and put my hand on the boy's shoulder. I am Coleman Jeffries. I am an architect. I am a father to a movement. And this game, this long, painful, beautiful game, I have finally won. I look directly into the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall for the first time. If you are watching this and you feel alone in your own house, if you feel like the people who are supposed to love you are the ones holding the knife, do not give up. Do not let them take your spirit. Stand up, fight back, and remember that the best revenge is not cruelty. The best revenge is living a life so full, so good, and so just that they become nothing more than a footnote in your story. I turn back to the boy. Set them up, Malik. Let us play one more game. The screen fades to black. The sound of a chess piece clicking against the stone echoes in the silence. Through Coleman's journey, we learn a painful but necessary truth. Biology makes us relatives, but only loyalty makes us family. It is a heartbreaking realization that sometimes the people we hold closest are the ones sharpening the knife. But Cole taught us that it is never too late to reclaim your dignity. You do not have to set yourself on fire just to keep ungrateful people warm. True strength is not about enduring abuse in silence for the sake of tradition. It is about having the courage to walk away and build a fortress of peace, even if you have to build it alone. Respect is not given, it is earned, and self-respect is the one thing you should never sell. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more tales of justice and redemption. I want to hear from you in the comments. If you were in Cole's shoes, would you have left the door open for Damon, or was Cole right to cut him off forever? Let me know your thoughts below, and thank you for watching.